University of Tokyo Open Campus this weekend. The words University of Tokyo Todai made AI's heart lurch, and suddenly another wave of memory crashed over her, more intense than the last. She was 16, bubbling with adrenaline and exhaustion as she stepped off the train after a 3-day regional idol tour. It was nearly night by the time she hurried through the quiet residential streets to the house she called home. The old 2-story Western-style house always reminded her of something from a ghost story with its creaky iron gate and overgrown front garden, but to AI it was the warmest, brightest place in the world. It was Hiroshi and Inorai-san's house, no, her house too, ever since they had taken her in. She had practically flown up the path, her suitcase thumping against her leg, eager to share every detail of the concert with her family. Hiroshi. Oh Kachin. I'm back. AI had called as she kicked off her shoes in the entryway. Normally, Inorai, or Okachan, as AI affectionately called Hiroshi's mother, would rush to greet her, enveloping her in a hug and fussing over how tired she must be. And Hiroshi, if he wasn't hiding to jump out and scare her, would wander in with that lazy grin, asking how the Airhead Idols shows went this time. But that evening, the house was unsettlingly quiet. AI's voice echoed back to her from the high ceilings. She wheeled her suitcase into the living room, the anticipation of sharing her triumph deflating into confusion. Hello? Hiro? Oh Kachin, she called again, softer. No answer. The only sound was the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. AI set down her luggage, trying not to let worry creep in. Maybe they stepped out for groceries or went for a walk. It was unusual for them not to tell her, but not impossible. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her she'd skipped dinner on the train. So she headed to the kitchen to reheat some leftovers and wait. She was sure they'd be back any minute. In the kitchen, AI flicked on the light and opened the refrigerator. Sure enough, Inorai-san had left a covered plate of curry for her. AI smiled. Okachan was always so thoughtful. As she set the plate in the microwave, something on the dining table caught her eye. A pile of documents and envelopes lay there, looking important and a little messy, as if hastily assembled. AI drifted over, curiosity piqued. On top of the pile lay a large envelope embossed with the University of Tokyo seal. With a thrill, she realized it was likely Hiroshi's college admission results. Her heart skipped as she tore the envelope open, hands trembling in excitement. She scanned the official letter inside, pleased to inform you of your acceptance. Faculty of Economics, Business Program. He did it, AI whispered, a grin breaking across her face. Oh my God, he did it. Her voice rang out in the empty house. She clutched the letter to her chest, pride and joy welling up. Hiroshi had been accepted into Todai's business program, one of the toughest universities in the country. Of course he had, he was brilliant. She could already imagine his sheepish shrug when she'd inevitably shower him with praise. And Inorai-san's gentle smile, perhaps a few tears of joy in her eyes at her son's achievement. AI practically bounced on her toes, wanting to share this moment with them right now. But where were they? It wasn't like them to miss greeting her after a trip, especially one of her first big tours. AI pulled out her phone and shot off a quick text to Hiroshi, I'm home. Where are you? I have amazing news. And I think you do too, Mr. Todai. Call me. She added a flurry of celebratory emojis and hit send. Setting her phone down, AI tried to be patient. The microwave beeped and she retrieved her curry, sitting at the small kitchen table to eat. The house still felt too silent. The curry tasted delicious, but she barely noticed the flavors, her mind running through possibilities of where they could be. Perhaps they had gone out to celebrate his acceptance. But wouldn't they wait for her? Hiroshi knew she'd be back tonight. Maybe there was an emergency? AI's grip on her spoon tightened. She checked her phone, no reply yet, and the message hadn't even been marked as read. After a few bites, her gaze drifted back to the stack of documents. The Todai acceptance letter wasn't the only thing there. AI pushed aside the university envelope to examine the rest. There was a smaller sealed envelope with her own name scribbled on it, AI Hoshino, in Hiroshi's handwriting. Strange. She set it aside for a moment, heart beginning to pound inexplicably. Beneath it lay several official-looking papers. The first one was a property title transfer. AI schemed it, eyes widening as she recognized the address. This house, the one they lived in, was listed, and so was her own name as the new owner. What? She murmured. Sure enough, it was a deed, legally transferring ownership of the house from Hiroshi to AI. His signature was scrawled at the bottom, dated just yesterday. AI's mouth went dry. Why would he do this now without even telling her? Hands unsteady, she leafed through the next document. It was a printout of bank account information, 2 accounts, one for Inorai Kobayashi and one for Hiroshi Kobayashi. Each account was accompanied by passwords, PIN codes, security details, even a note about how to access them online. These were all of Hiroshi and Okachan's savings, laid out neatly for her. AI's breathing turned shallow. It felt like the walls of the kitchen were suddenly closing in. This was the kind of information someone left behind when they weren't planning to be around to use it. Like a will, whispered a panicked voice in her mind. No. No, that's crazy. She grabbed her phone again and dialed Hiroshi's number, heart thudding. It rang. And rang. Usually he answered by the second ring, always joking that he had a sixth sense for when she was calling. But now, it rang through to voicemail. She hung up and tried again immediately, hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. Still no answer. AI's fingers felt numb as she tapped on Inorai-san's contact next. The call barely had a chance to connect before she heard a familiar tune chiming faintly from the living room. AI froze, then rose slowly from the kitchen chair. She followed the sound with dread pooling in her stomach, each step toward the living room heavy like wading through water. There, on the sofa's armrest, lay Inorai's cell phone vibrating against the fabric and playing its cheerful ringtone. Okachan never went anywhere without her phone. She was as attached to it as any modern adult. AI's pulse pounded in her ears. Something was very, very wrong. She snatched up Inorai's phone, as if it might contain answers, but the lock screen just showed AI's missed call. No clues, no messages. AI stood in the silent living room, the sinking sun casting long shadows through the lace curtains. Her mind raced, grasping at any reasonable explanation, but coming up empty. People don't just leave behind their wallets and phones and important documents neatly arranged, unless they don't expect to come back. No, AI whispered aloud, her voice trembling in the empty room. Don't you dare, Hiroshi. This isn't funny. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as panic set in. She noticed then that the sealed envelope with her name on it, which she'd set aside, was now resting on top of the pile in her hands, as if demanding to be opened. With a whimper of dread, AI tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Hiroshi's handwriting. The normally neat characters were hurried, slanting across the page. A few ink smudges stained the margins. Had his hand been shaking as badly as hers was now? AI pressed a hand over her mouth, trying to steady herself, and began to read. A/N wrote this letter when listening to Kamen. Do that if you want to get emotional and make the letter truly hit you. To AI-chan, my airhead, my brightest light. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I wish there was a way to start this that didn't sound so damn final, but I never was any good at writing letters, was I? It's not like I ever planned on being the sort of man who left things unsaid, let alone in ink. I always thought I'd be the one annoying you by living too long hogging the blankets and the remote, eating the last of your favorite pudding, yelling at you for not taking your vitamins, getting scolded by Oka-san for leaving dirty socks everywhere. I wanted to be that guy, growing old and cranky with you and with her, surrounded by a pile of laundry and empty snack wrappers and all the mess we made together. If you're reading this, it means I don't get to be that man. I'm sorry. God, I don't even know where to start. You know I always joked that words were your thing, not mine. I always let you talk when things got hard and hid behind my grumpy act. But there are things I owe you. Things you always wanted to know. You used to stare at those scars on my arms and back, run your fingers over them at night, and you'd ask, "Where did you get these, Hiroshi?" I'd make some dumb joke. Say I fell out of a tree, or got into a fight with a particularly vicious Shiba Inu, or that Oka-san chased me around with a broom when I stole her last onigiri. And you'd just shake your head and roll your eyes and call me a liar. You always saw through me, even then. But I never told you. Not really. I never could. You wanted to know about my scars, about Oka-san and me, about where we came from and why the nightmares kept waking me up screaming at 3 a.m. You wanted to know why I hated hospitals, why loud bangs made me flinch, why sometimes I'd go so quiet it felt like I disappeared from the room even when I was sitting right there beside you. I'm going to tell you everything now. It's the least I can do, since I can't tell you in person, since I'm leaving you with this damn letter instead of a goodbye you deserve. You know the story, the one I have told you over and over? They escaped from bad people in a war zone version? That wasn't a story, AI. That was my whole life. I was 5, maybe 6, I'm not even sure anymore when those people came for me. Scientists, soldiers, monsters in white coats, people with money and no souls. They took me and other kids, hundreds of us, AI. Kids with nothing. Orphans, runaways, street rats, children whose parents sold them for a handful of bills or a promise. We were numbers on a clipboard to them, just raw material. They put us in cells, cold and empty. They strapped us to beds and pumped us full of things, drugs, chemicals, things I still taste in the back of my throat sometimes when I wake up sweating at night. They cut us open, AI. They put things in us, tracking chips, wires, who the hell knows what else. Some of it was just pain. Testing limits, they called it. I was a project, not a person. I don't remember everything. Sometimes that's a blessing. But there are things I'll never forget, the taste of metal, the cold, the screaming mine and others. The smell of burning plastic and ammonia. The scientists who took notes while we cried, the guards who laughed, the ones who looked away and pretended not to see. There were good people too. There always are. Oka-san was one of them. She was a researcher, brilliant, gentle, broken. She couldn't save everyone, but she saved me. She and others like her risked everything to get us out. Some of them died for it. My siblings weren't really siblings. Ria, who named me Hiroshi, was just the girl in the cell beside mine, but she was family in all the ways that matter. She didn't make it out. Most didn't. The day we escaped was chaos. Alarms, gunfire, the stink of blood and panic. I ran. Oka-san grabbed my hand and never let go. I didn't look back. I never looked back. We spent years hiding. New names, new cities, forged papers. Oka-san became my mother in every way that matters, even if she was only 10 years older than me, still a girl herself. She gave me her family name Kobayashi. I wore it with pride. She was always a little cold, a little distant, but she tried to give me a life. I owe her everything. 6 years ago, we came to Japan, Oka-san's home country. We finally landed in Tokyo. This big old house, as you know, belonged to Oka-san, it was her family home, and with everyone else gone, it became just the two of us. Then you barged into my life. God, I still remember that day you caught me scolding Oka-san, who was still wearing her damn lab coat after coming straight from her night shift at the clinic. You wandered in, saw the maid wanted sign on our haunted house with the overgrown garden that everyone else avoided, and decided to start working for us and living with us. You sang off-key in the shower, broke my precious gaming console, and made me teach you how to fix it, and you stole all the best snacks from the fridge, always blaming Oka-san. You called me grumpy old man even though I'm barely older than you. But you made me laugh, AI. You made me feel like a person again. You always said I saved you, that I taught you what love was. But you never realized you were saving me right back. You dragged me into your world, into the sunshine, out of the darkness. For the first time, I wasn't just a survivor, I was alive. I got to be a stupid teenager, to love, to fight, to make mistakes, to learn. I got to have my first real friend, my first real love, my first family. And the day you finally met Pikachu, do you remember how terrified you were of him at first? And Daisy, that tiny Ralts who clung to you like a shadow? Our little family, as weird as it was. It was borrowed time. I always knew it couldn't last. People like me don't get happy endings, AI. But I wanted to believe. I wanted to build a future with you, even if I was just lying to myself. I wanted to see you at Tokyo Dome, waving to thousands of fans. I wanted to see you act in movies, write your own music, maybe someday start a family with you. I wanted to be there for every milestone, every heartbreak, every silly fight over what anime to watch or whose turn it was to cook dinner. I wanted to grow old, AI. With you. But the past always finds you. I was a fool to think I'd escaped. They found us, AI. I don't know how, maybe we got sloppy, maybe someone we trusted sold us out, maybe we were just unlucky. All I know is, one day Oka-san didn't come home. She didn't call. Her phone was left on the couch. I knew, right away, something was wrong. When I tried to reach my contacts, they were gone, disappeared, dead, or scared silent. Then the message came. Come back or she dies. That simple. No threats, no demands. They took her to lure me out. And it worked. I'm sorry, AI. I'm so sorry. I know this isn't fair to you. I know I promised I'd never leave you. But I can't let Oka-san die because of me. I can't live with another person's blood on my hands. Not again. I have to go. I have to finish what I started. I have to destroy them from the inside, whatever it takes. Maybe this time, I won't make it back. Maybe I don't deserve to. I wish I could say goodbye in person. I wish I could see your face one more time, hold you, tell you how much I love you. But I can't. If I say goodbye, I won't be able to leave. I'm not strong enough. So I'm doing this the coward's way, with a letter. You always teased me for being old-fashioned. Everything I own is yours now. The house is in your name, there's a copy of the deed in this envelope. The accounts are all yours, 2 details and pins are in the folder. Any royalties or contracts I ever signed, you get them all. Use them for yourself, or for your career, or just to keep the fridge full of snacks. I don't care. Just, don't waste your life chasing ghosts. And if anyone asks about us, about Pokémon, about me, about Oka-san, tell them nothing. Tell them you were just a roommate, that you barely knew us. Most of the people asking won't really be working for the government. They're not trying to help you. They're trying to find me, or worse, trying to use you as bait. Don't trust anyone, AI. Not even the ones with badges. Not even investigators. The world is full of masks. And about Pikachu and Daisy, I'm sorry, AI. They tried to protect Oka-san. They're gone too. Don't ask after them. If you ever see someone with a Pokémon that looks familiar, run. I wish I could promise you safety, but I can't. All I can do is ask you to hide. I love you, AI. I love you more than words can ever say, more than I ever said in person. I love how you steal the blankets, how you sing terrible renditions of love songs at 2 a.m., how you make faces at the TV and always cry at that one stupid anime with the dog. I love how you yell at Oka-san for forgetting her umbrella, how you still can't make rice without burning it, how you always mess up the lyrics and never admit it. I love your real self and your airhead idol act, the girl who could be both a genius and an absolute ditz in the span of 5 minutes. I love the way you blush when you get embarrassed, how you ramble when you're nervous, how you chase your dreams with a stubbornness that would make a bull jealous. If I could have one more day, I'd spend it holding you close, listening to you complain about how crowded Shibuya Station was, or how the manager yelled at you for being 5 minutes late, or how you wish I'd cook more often instead of living on convenience store bento. I'd tell you every secret I never told, every regret I have, every hope I ever dared to hold for us. But I can't. So I'll say it here, one last time, I love you, AI. More than I ever thought I could love anyone. Please, please, move on. Don't waste your life waiting for a dead man. Don't put your dreams on hold for me. Be happy, AI. That's all I want for you. Find someone who makes you laugh, who sings along with your terrible karaoke, who buys you flowers when you're sad. Find someone who looks at you and sees the world's brightest star, because you are. You always were. Don't cry for me. I don't want that. I want you to live. I want you to shine so bright that even I can see it from wherever I end up. I want you to become the actress and singer you're meant to be. I want you to fill Tokyo Dome and every theater after that. Remember those scripts I hid in my upper cabinet? I wrote them for you. Ambitious stuff, stuff that would terrify producers if you pitched them now. But when you have the clout, when the world's finally ready to see how brilliant you are, take them and run. Make them your own. And please watch out for your stalkers. I never trusted those creeps who hung around outside your shows. Transition your career, AI. You're so much more than the airhead idol. You have a gift, a voice, a fire. Use it. For yourself. For the world. For us. As for Oka-san, don't mourn her yet. I promised her I'd get her back. And I will. Even if I have to burn down the world to do it. She's your family, too. She always loved you, even if she showed it in weird ways. When I find her, I'll send her back to you on the next flight. I swear. Take care of her for me. When you look up at the night sky, think of me. I'll be looking back at you, I promise. If there's another life, I'll find you again, AI-chan. Maybe next time we'll have more time. Maybe next time we'll get our happy ending. Don't forget me, but don't wait for me either. Live. I love you, brat. Your Hiroshi. PS, change the locks. And for the love of God, stop leaving your key under the doormat. Even a brain-dead stalker could figure that out. PPS. If you find any embarrassing manga in my closet, you're forbidden to read it. I mean it. Burn it. PPPS, but not before you read the ending. It's pretty good, I promise. Each line of Hiroshi's letter drove a nail deeper into AI's heart. By the time she reached the end, her whole body was trembling. Tears streamed freely down her face, blurring the ink on the page. No, 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 she gasped, clutching the letter to her chest as if trying to hug a part of him one last time. A wail of anguish built in her throat and escaped, echoing in the empty house. Hiroshi. AI sank to her knees on the living room floor, sobbing uncontrollably. She felt like a child again, abandoned and helpless. How could he do this? How could he just decide to throw his life away? How could he tell her to move on as if 5 years of loving him could be turned off like a switch? It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. She didn't know how long she sat there on the hardwood, crying into the silence. Eventually, when her tears were spent and only ragged whimpers remained, AI forced herself to read the letter again, and again, hoping each time the words might change. But they never did. He was gone. He had walked out of this house knowing he might never return, and he hadn't even said goodbye in person. Because he knew she would try to stop him. He knew she would have dropped everything to run after him, maybe even to fight alongside him. That's why he timed it for when she was away on tour to save her the choice, to ensure she couldn't follow. AI's hands curled into fists, crumpling the edges of the letter. "You liar," she whispered brokenly into the empty room. "You will come back. You have to." She looked around desperately, as if expecting him to appear in the doorway and prove this was all some cruel prank. But only her own distorted reflection in the darkened TV screen stared back at her, a pale girl on the floor with hope and heartbreak warring in her eyes. Standing under the glow of the Todai billboard, AI realized her cheeks were wet. She quickly wiped her face with the back of her hand. The day's last light had faded into a deep blue twilight. She was late. Ruby and Aqua would be waiting for her, wondering where their mother was. AI drew in a long, shaky breath and steadied herself. First and foremost, she had to live her life for her children, and for herself. "My kids. Ours." Her chest swelled, pride and love cutting through the sadness like a thin beam of sunlight. Hers and Hiroshi's children, Ruby, with her galaxy eyes and mischievous smile, and Aqua, already too clever for his own good. Both had inherited Hiroshi's hair the exact same shade, silver bright and impossible to miss in a crowd. It almost made her laugh sometimes. "Can't believe you passed on your hair and your scary IQ, but left me to handle all the chaos, you jerk," she muttered, lips quirking in the faintest smile. But she kept going. One foot in front of the other. That was all she could do. Keep acting on stage, on set, at home, keep raising her kids, keep smiling even on the days when her whole body wanted to curl up and give up. But she'd also learned to keep her eyes open, scanning every crowd, every street, every festival for some trace of him. Every so often, she'd hear a laugh or see a glimpse of that silvery hair and her heart would leap just for a second before logic caught up. "If you're hiding out there, you'd better have a good excuse, Hiroshi," she said softly to the wind, "because I am not done yelling at you yet. 5 years, and I'm not giving up," AI murmured, voice firmer now. It felt like a vow. "You hear that, you stubborn idiot? I'll see you again. I don't care how long it takes. I'll be right here. Waiting. Watching. You can run, but you can't hide from me forever." She let herself picture it how she'd track him down and slap him first, for being an ass and making me cry like this, then pull him into the biggest, messiest hug of her life. "And you better believe, Hiroshi Kobayashi, I'm marrying you the moment I find you." She sniffled, but her mouth curled into a mischievous grin. "Just wait till I spring the surprise that you're already a dad, twins, by the way, not just one. 4 years old. I can't wait to see your face, you disaster man. You'll probably faint. How did I make you pregnant at 16? We used protection. I will sue the damn company for selling faulty products." I can already hear you yelling that. Her laughter bubbled up, a little unsteady, but real. "Serves you right, you absolute menace. See what happens when you disappear on me." The wind picked up, cold and a little too sharp for April, tugging at her hair and coat. AI shivered, pulled her jacket tight around herself, and squared her shoulders. She started walking again, shoes scuffing quietly on the pavement. There was a world to live, and she refused to miss any more of it than she had to. "Ruby, Aqua. Mama's coming. Sorry I'm late." Her heart thudded with the familiar ache and joy of motherhood, the sweet weight that kept her grounded, even when the rest of her life felt like it was spinning apart. As she passed a bakery, she imagined Okasan's burnt miso soup, the taste both awful and perfect, and Hiroshi fussing in the kitchen, grumbling about saving the meal while secretly loving every minute of it. "You still owe me a home-cooked dinner," AI whispered. And I still owe you a scolding. Oka-san too, when she gets back. We're not done yet. You promised, remember? Maybe he couldn't hear her. Maybe all of this was talking to empty air, to memories, to the hope she refused to let die. But it didn't matter. She would keep hoping. She would keep living. She would keep loving him, openly and stubbornly, as long as it took. He's out there somewhere, Ai told herself once more as she hurried into the Tokyo night. He's out there. And I'll be here when he comes home. Oka-san hasn't come home yet, so his promise isn't fulfilled. He always keeps his promises no matter how long it takes. Someday, she'd have all of them back, eating miso soup that was a little burnt, maybe laughing in a too big house that finally felt full again. And until then, she'd live enough for all of them. Chapter 59, Political Front Moves in the Dark, 2. Makima resumed pacing. She was a graceful metronome of menace, her heels clicking softly across the tatami as she ticked off enemies and obstacles with mechanical precision. Minister Fujimura, she began, her tone devoid of warmth. Oversees the PSIA's discretionary funding, including equipment and field operation budgets. Rumored to be the Shinomiya Group's man for the past 7 years. Likes to appear clean. Travels often. Offshore accounts in Hong Kong, Dubai, and Baku. Dirty, the PM asked, though he already knew. Makima lifted a slim dossier and set it on the table before him. Photos of him accepting briefcases from an unregistered diplomatic vehicle, just last month. Accompanied by falsified travel logs and an anonymous tip courtesy of our allies in the press. Tomorrow morning, this package is being delivered to a senior reporter at Nikkei. She said it like she was ordering groceries. He'll be too busy defending himself in a PR inferno to protect anyone. By noon, he'll have resigned from the Diet's Intelligence Budget Committee. By dusk, he'll be testifying for the prosecution, whether he knows it or not. It blinked slowly. We're burning him completely. Makima didn't answer. She pulled out another folder. Tanaka. General Secretary Tanaka, an ancient pillar of the party's backroom politics. Not guilty of conspiracy, but too influential, too stubborn, too unpredictable. Tanaka's old habits, she said. Photographs. Dated receipts. 2 bank transfers to a certain mistress's account in Okinawa. She placed the folder down. I handed them to him this morning in a tea house in Akasaka, she said. He didn't finish his tea. And he agreed, the PM asked. Makima's smile was slow, cold. He asked if I needed help drafting the announcement of our arrests. Said he would be honored to restore public trust in the agency by being the one to announce the purge. And that we could count on his vote in the committee. It rubbed his temples again. Gods help us, we're building a machine made of blackmail. Makima ignored the lament. It will hold long enough to cleanse Kanto. She set down the final folder. Fune. Judge Fune. High Court. Known Shige loyalist. His wife received a phone call tonight, Makima said softly. It wasn't traced. A female voice warned that their 2 daughters in Geneva would be subject to scrutiny. One visa has already been flagged. The Swiss are eager to cooperate if we use the correct language. She waited for its reaction. He looked shaken. That's crossing into foreign territory. Not if no one proves we made the call, Makima said flatly, her voice cool and without ornament. Fune's wife cried for 20 minutes on the phone. Then she begged him to step down. He's resigning for stress-related health reasons and catching a private morning flight to Switzerland. She glanced out the tall windows of the Prime Minister's private residence. Beyond the drawn curtains, Tokyo's skyline glimmered faintly in the pre-dawn haze. His seat, she continued, is booked under a fabricated identity. His medical leave forms were filed by 3 a.m., and the court calendar for Thursday has already been quietly restructured. By the time we serve our warrants, the bench will be clean. Surgical. It sat in silence across from her, fingertips steepled, his half-drunk glass of whiskey untouched for the last hour. The tension in the room was quiet but electric, like the breath before a storm. Makima's gaze returned to the room's dim interior. The dossier folders, the shredded notes in the bin, the half-burned incense meant to mask fatigue and power brokering. All symbols of a war not waged with guns, but leverage. Blackmail. Bribery. Intimidation. Framing. Lies. She wielded them like a scalpel, carving out infection from the nation's bones. As she mentally reviewed the past 48 hours, the smothered scandals, the bribed journalists, the broken men who begged for silence, Makima felt no remorse. Only a grim satisfaction. This was the war that had to be fought to make the real one possible. If we fail, she thought briefly, we will never get another chance. Then, coldly, she pushed the thought aside. Failure was not a variable. The price of hesitation was too high. The cost would not just be political, it would be generational collapse, the kind that buried nations in rot. And Hiroshi, her Hiroshi, had already seen too much to ever allow that. It cleared his throat. That agent of yours? Hiroshi. He's done well. Makima's gaze sharpened. He's thoroughly embedded himself in the Kanto branch, it continued. Your appointment of him raised eyebrows, especially so suddenly. They called him my pet behind closed doors, Makima cut in, a dry edge to her voice. It smirked faintly. Exactly. They suspected you appointed him to paper push your reform agendas behind Takeda's back. The rumor mill is humming. The naive silver-haired dog who only barks when Makima whistles. That's the image they've embraced. Makima's smile was faint, but it curled with satisfaction. Good. Let them think that. She crossed to the edge of the table and gently placed a tablet screen before the Prime Minister. It flickered to life, showing Hiroshi in the Kanto PSIA main corridor, head slightly lowered, expression wide-eyed, exchanging awkward pleasantries with a grinning section chief. Every time they underestimate him, Makima said softly, he grows sharper. Deeper. More invisible. She tapped the side of the tablet. The image shifted, now showing a time-stamped surveillance feed from another corridor. Hiroshi, dressed as a completely different man, wearing one of his latex masks, slipping into a restricted office under the pretense of being a janitor. In just 3 years, she continued, Hiroshi has completed 46 operations. Every one of them classified. Every one rated S rank. No leaks. No compromise. He has impersonated everything from foreign diplomats to internal auditors, and yet there's not a single agent inside the branch who can confidently describe what he truly looks like beneath his polite expression. It exhaled. And now he's embedded among the rot. Like a scalpel inside a tumor, Makima said. No one sees him as a threat, which makes him the most dangerous person in the building. Takeda and his circle think they're using him, it murmured. Feeding him documents, controlling what he sees. Trying to steer him. Makima nodded. They're digging their own graves with every conversation. A beat of silence passed. If we win, she said, voice dropping half a register, we'll answer for it. However we must. History will judge us. Law will catch up. Maybe even the people, one day. Her amber eyes did not blink. But if we lose? She looked back out the window at Tokyo. There won't be a country left to answer to. Her voice, so flat and mechanical a moment ago, now cracked slightly, almost imperceptibly, with certainty, not fear. If we lose, Takeda and his masters will metastasize. They'll purge the reformists. Flood the government with sellouts. Reinstate the underworld as a shadow ministry. Pokémon trafficking will go global. And the ringmaster's legacy, the dream of artificial gods sold to the highest bidder, will never die. A knock at the door interrupted them. Makima's aide, a normally implacable woman, entered and bowed, her face slightly pale. Pardon the intrusion. Director Makima, the package has arrived. In the garage. Makima's eyebrows rose a fraction. That was quick. She exchanged a glance with it. Excuse me a moment, Prime Minister. She followed the aide out, down a side stairwell into the residence's underground garage. There, two heavy-set men in dark civilian clothes stood guard by a black unmarked van. They straightened and saluted Makima as she approached. Director. We brought him, one reported. Makima stepped to the rear of the van. One of the men opened the doors. Inside, slumped on the floor with hands zip-tied, was a disheveled middle-aged man, one of the PSIA traders from the branch, a tech specialist they had quietly nabbed off the street an hour ago. His face was bloodied, clearly he had resisted. He looked up at Makima with a mixture of anger and fear. You can't do this, he rasped. I'm a government officer. You were, Makima corrected coldly. She climbed into the van, crouching so that her immaculate suit remained out of the dirt pooling on the floor. In the dim light, her eyes almost seemed to glow as she regarded the captive. Mr. Sasaki, is it? Section 4's network supervisor. He recoiled that she knew his name. What do you want? I haven't done anything wrong. It was almost convincing, said with a desperate earnestness. But Makima had heard better performances. She also had a manila folder full of proof that this man had systematically erased records and planted malware for Jackal's spy network. Makima held up a single hand, and one of the men outside the van slid the door half shut, giving them muffled privacy. Mr. Sasaki, she began softly, I have evidence that could see you tried for high treason. That's a death sentence. She said it almost gently, as if discussing the weather. Sasaki's eyes widened, his breath coming in frantic gasps. I don't. You have the wrong, he spluttered, but Makima continued without inflection, however, I'm prepared to offer you a chance. She tilted her head slightly. You will record a statement, right here, right now, detailing every illegal order you followed and which superiors gave them. Do that, and you will be charged with a lesser crime and merely disappear quietly to prison. Refuse. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And I hand you to him. She didn't point, but Sasaki knew whom she meant. One of the guards leaned into the light just enough for his heavily scarred face to be visible. Kishive, who had come personally for this pickup. The older man's single eye bore into the prisoner with an unmistakable promise of violence. It was no secret in certain circles that Kishive had methods that never saw the inside of a courtroom. Sasaki began to tremble. This isn't legal, he whimpered. Makima's expression didn't waver. Neither is selling state secrets to foreign agents, yet here we are. Her tone was almost bored. Decide quickly. My colleague here is eager to chat with you if you're uncooperative. Kishive cracked his knuckles, the sound like gunshots in the silence. Tears of rage and terror leaked down Sasaki's face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then hung his head. Fine, he choked out. I'll talk. Within minutes, a small recorder was placed in front of the captive and he began haltingly speaking, confessing details of encrypted drives, name-dropping Takeda and others as having given him directives to sabotage systems. Makima listened impassively, arms folded. The man's sobbing excuses and apologies rolled off her like rain on glass. All she cared about were the facts he provided, each corroborating what Hiroshi's team had already gathered: more nails in the conspirators' coffins. When Sasaki finished, Makima signaled to the men. Gag him and take him to the site. The site was a black location where he'd be stashed with a guard for a few days. After the operation, he'd be officially discovered and arrested, to make his confession legitimate in court. Until then, he was just another pawn to be kept in play. As the van doors shut, muffling the renewed sobbing inside, Makima allowed herself a slow exhale. She despised letting even a minor traitor think they might escape true justice with a plea deal, but she needed him as a witness. She reminded herself, ends and means. A necessary trade. Kishive approached her, wiping Sasaki's blood from his knuckles with a handkerchief. He spilled plenty. Fear'll do that, he remarked in a gravelly voice. His gaze searched Makama's. You all right, Director? Makama gave a curt nod. I'm fine. Thank you for expediting this. Kishive shrugged. It'll get uglier before dawn, I reckon. But you knew that. He didn't wait for a response, slinging into the passenger seat of the van as the team prepared to depart. Before closing the door, he added, Hiroshi and the others they're holding up. Ready to finish this? There was a hint of pride in the veteran's voice. I know, Makama replied. They'd better be, she thought but did not say. Drive safe. With that, she turned on her heel and walked back toward the residence, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete. Returning to the Prime Minister's private study, Makama stepped through the half-open shoji door with her usual composed stride. The scent of sandalwood incense lingered faintly in the air, blending with the crisp night breeze that crept in from the open veranda. Prime Minister It stood there in silence, back to her, his silhouette outlined by the moonlight filtering over the stone garden beyond. A koi pond shimmered in stillness below, undisturbed by wind or fish. It was the kind of view meant to soothe the mind, but there was no peace tonight. He didn't turn. All handled? He asked, his voice low, fatigued. Makama stepped beside him, hands still behind her back. Yes, she replied curtly. The recording has been secured. He confessed to everything. Delivery teams are en route to contain him. A moment passed in quiet. The only sound was the faint rustling of the PM's papers on his desk behind them and the rhythmic chirping of summer insects outside. The moon hovered above the trees like an eye watching from afar. It finally looked at her. You didn't hesitate, he said, his voice thoughtful. You've always been good at that. But I wonder how much does it cost you? Makama's gaze didn't waver from the garden. That's not a luxury I calculate, Prime Minister. He nodded slowly, then glanced sideways. When was the last time you slept, Makama? She blinked, faintly surprised by the personal nature of the question. For a second, the iron mask cracked not with vulnerability, but with weariness she didn't bother hiding. I don't recall, she admitted. It doesn't matter. Its brows furrowed slightly. It does to me. But Makama said nothing. There was nothing to say. Just then, her phone vibrated. Not the primary one, the secured device Hiroshi had configured for only 2 users. She retrieved it from her inner coat pocket, her movements swift and efficient. A pale blue screen lit up with a single blinking identifier, K-Fox Priority Link. She answered without a word. Hiroshi, she said calmly. Reporting in, his voice came through the line. Slightly filtered, but still distinctly his low, steady, precise. No exposure. Phase 2 surveillance continues. Agents are in place. Evidence volumes increasing. Morale stable. She said nothing, letting him continue. Takeda hasn't made any overt moves. But he's testing me more directly today. He suspects Makama's favor shields me, but not how deep we've dug. We'll continue the naive act. It's working. Everyone still thinks I'm a soft pawn. They'll slip soon. Makama allowed a small exhale through her nose. Her gaze remained on the koi pond. And the team, she asked. Focused. Denji's restless. Power is frustrated. Aki's holding the line. Kobani's nervous but reliable. Kishive is. Kishive. We're prepared. Silence again. This time a longer one. Both knew what lay beneath the status updates, the risk of exposure, of failure. The sheer weight of lives at stake if even one part of this orchestration faltered. Makama closed her eyes. She could imagine him at that moment leaning against the edge of a control desk, sleeves rolled up, maybe sipping lukewarm coffee while Alakazam floated behind him, scanning reports faster than any analyst. His silver hair catching dim light, face unreadable, hiding exhaustion behind a half-smile. The man who had carried burdens that would have crushed lesser men. She had seen him shattered once before and rebuilt himself stronger. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Almost human. Hiroshi. 5 days. On the line, Hiroshi didn't answer immediately. She could feel the weight of that silence. A pause filled with acceptance. In the far corner of the study, the antique wall clock ticked quietly past midnight. Tuesday had begun. You have 5 days left, Makima repeated, her voice firmer now. Use them well. There was no room for misunderstanding. The deadline was fixed. When the time came, she would unleash the full machinery of state raids, arrests, media blackouts, and political sacrifices. Every traitor they had marked would be eliminated or exposed. And if any threads still dangled, she'd burn them. They could not afford mercy. Not now. Finally, Hiroshi responded, voice as calm as ever. Understood. See you on the other side. Chapter 60, The Naive Assistant Director. A cool morning light filtered through the tall windows of PSIA's Kanto branch headquarters. Hiroshi Kobayashi walked the corridors in a neatly pressed charcoal suit, shoulders slightly hunched in deference, an earnest half-smile on his face. To any observer, he was every bit the greenhorn assistant director, overly polite, eager to please, almost painfully naive. He bowed twice to the same passing administrator and apologized profusely when he nearly collided with a secretary at the elevator. The secretary waved it off with a chuckle, thinking nothing of the young man's fumbling courtesy. No one noticed anything amiss. In the eyes of the branch's staff, Assistant Director Kobayashi was a benign non-entity competent enough in paperwork, but hardly a threat to anyone's schemes. Exactly as planned. Inside the elevator, Hiroshi's gentle smile faded for an instant. In the polished steel door's reflection, he caught sight of 2 fellow officers behind him. One he knew was an honest analyst, the other a mole feeding intel to foreign spies. The mole, Section Chief Kitamura, stood relaxed, even amiable, as he scrolled on his phone. Kitamura thought himself completely in control. Hiroshi had spent days cultivating that sense of security, playing the part of a meek junior who deferred to Kitamura's experience at every turn. As the elevator doors opened, Hiroshi stepped out first, then quickly pivoted to hold the door for the others with a polite bow. After you, Chief, he insisted. Kitamura nodded in appreciation and strode past, oblivious to the subtle scrutiny behind Hiroshi's dark eyes. Body language spoke volumes. The slight uptick at the corner of Kitamura's mouth as he glanced at Hiroshi was smug satisfaction. The traitor chief clearly believed he had the assistant director wrapped around his finger. Hiroshi kept his head bowed and expression sheepish to reinforce that belief. In a morning briefing, Director Takeda, the branch chief and ringleader, convened his division heads around a long conference table. Hiroshi took a modest seat near the end, a thin binder of reports in front of him. As Takeda droned on about operational excellence and remaining vigilant against external threats, Hiroshi nodded enthusiastically at each platitude, even jotting fake notes. His keen eyes, however, roved over the faces of those gathered. He watched for every micro-expression, the flicker of worry in Takeda's eyes when he mentioned a recent internal affairs audit, the tight press of Chief Mori's lips when overseas intelligence leaks were brought up, the faint boredom of Kitamura that didn't quite hide a sheen of sweat on his brow. Hiroshi interjected only once, in an innocuous tone, perhaps we should consider stricter chain of custody protocols for classified documents, sir. Just as a precaution. He delivered it with a nervous smile, as if unsure of himself. Takeda gave him an indulgent look and chuckled. A fine suggestion, Kobayashi-kun, but unnecessary. We have complete trust in our staff here, the director replied, voice smooth. Around the table, a few traders exchanged hooded glances and faint grins. The very idea of a security crackdown at this branch was amusing to them. Hiroshi blushed on cue and ducked his head. "Of course, sir. I only meant my apologies if I overstepped," he stammered. A ripple of quiet laughter circled the room, exactly the reaction he wanted. "They still think I'm harmless." As the meeting adjourned, Hiroshi shuffled his papers and made a show of accidentally spilling them. "So clumsy, ah!" he yelped as sheets scattered across the polished floor. Deputy Director Ito, one of the few honest officials left, bent to help him gather the papers. But Hiroshi had caused the distraction intentionally. While kneeling, he angled a quick glance under the table. There, attached to its underside right beneath Director Takeda's chair, glinted a tiny listening device one Kobani had planted the night before. Satisfied it was still in place and unnoticed, Hiroshi let Ito assist him to his feet. "Thank you, Ito-san, I'm hopeless sometimes," he murmured self-effacingly. Ito patted his shoulder kindly. "No trouble. We've all been young and overwhelmed." "You're doing fine," the older man said. Over Ito's shoulder, Hiroshi caught sight of Chief Mori watching the exchange. Mori's eyes were narrowed with suspicion. Of all the traders, Mori had been the wariest of Hiroshi's sudden appointment. Now he studied Hiroshi's clumsy display with a cold, calculating look. Hiroshi responded by flushing red and hurrying out of the conference room as if embarrassed beyond measure. Behind him, Mori's skepticism eased, the chief gave a soft snort, convinced anew that the assistant director was nothing more than an overeager child. As Hiroshi exited to the hallway, he allowed himself the faintest hint of a smirk while loosening his tie. In those brief moments of playing the fool, he had gathered plenty. Takeda's deflection on security measures confirmed he was hiding something, Mori's predatory stare reaffirmed his guilt, Kitamura's smugness hinted he'd passed off some intel recently, his phone likely held clues. Every subtle movement, every bead of sweat, every forced chuckle was a puzzle piece to Hiroshi's practiced eye. Psychological infiltration wasn't just about masks and gadgets, it was reading souls through posture and tone, luring the enemy into revealing themselves without ever realizing it. Hiroshi glanced at his watch. Only a couple of weeks remained before the hammer would fall, a hammer he intended to wield with absolute precision. But first, more pieces of the traitorous network's puzzle needed to be placed. As he walked down the corridor, he spotted Section Chief Sako, one of the mid-level moles, stepping out of an office with a file tucked under his arm. Sako's gaze darted around nervously until he saw Hiroshi approaching. Instantly, the man's demeanor shifted, he plastered on a genial smile. "Ah, Kobayashi-kun. Good morning," Sako greeted, a bit too heartily. Hiroshi returned a beaming, slightly flustered bow. "Good morning, Chief Sako. I have those clearance forms you requested yesterday. May I bring them by later?" he asked. Sako waved a hand. "No rush, no rush. End of day is fine." The older man looked Hiroshi up and down, as if reassessing him. Hiroshi met his eyes with guileless admiration. "Your briefing summary last week was incredibly thorough, sir. I learned so much," Hiroshi added for good measure. It was a lie. Sako's briefings were intentionally incomplete to hide his misdeeds, something Hiroshi's team had verified. But the flattery made Sako preen. "Always happy to mentor our rising stars," Sako replied, puffing his chest. Yet even as he spoke, a tremor in his voice betrayed him. Dark circles hung under Sako's eyes and his fingers drummed anxiously on the file folder he carried. "He's stressed," Hiroshi noted. After all, last night Sako had secretly handed off a stolen case file to a Shigecorp agent in an alley, an act Denji had witnessed from the shadows. Sako had no idea the PSIA's new assistant director had arranged that file as bait and then ordered his operatives not to intervene, not yet. The mole likely barely slept, worrying whether the deed had been noticed. Hiroshi gave a sympathetic tilt of his head. "Chief, you look tired. These long hours get to everyone." Sako blinked, then let out a self-pitying sigh. It's been stressful lately, Kobayashi-kun. So much pressure from upstairs. His eyes darted in the direction of Director Takeda's office. Sometimes I envy your youth. You still have the energy. Hiroshi offered a friendly grin. If it gets too much, my uncle always swore by a strong drink after work to clear the mind. Perhaps you should treat yourself tonight. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Between us, I go for plum wine on the tough days. A flicker of longing crossed Seiko's face. Ha! Perhaps I will. A drink sounds well deserved. He clapped Hiroshi on the arm. Don't pick up my bad habits though, kid. Too early for you to turn to the bottle. Hiroshi laughed innocently. Oh, of course not. Just one, now and then. As he took his leave, he knew Sako would indeed drink tonight. The man's nerves were fraying, and Hiroshi had subtly nudged him toward the solution he craved. By planting the idea of drowning stress in liquor, Hiroshi set the stage perfectly. Sako would find his way to a bar stool by late evening, searching for solace at the bottom of a glass. And when that moment came, Hiroshi would be ready to play a very special role. Chapter 61, Masquerade of Guilt. That night, a neon lantern buzzed fitfully above the entrance of a tiny backstreet izakaya in western Tokyo. The safe house had identified this bar as Seiko's favorite watering hole, a discreet spot where minor officials often drank their worries away. Sure enough, through the fogged glass window, Hiroshi spotted Section Chief Sako hunched at the counter, nursing his second or third whiskey. The trader's face was already flushed, and he gestured animatedly as he spoke to the bartender, perhaps spinning some tale to mask his own conscience. Hiroshi stepped into a nearby alley out of sight. In that dark recess, the transformation began. With steady hands, he affixed a thin latex mask over his own face, smoothing the edges carefully until they blended seamlessly with his skin. The mask was a perfect replica of another man's features, the face of Seiko's closest friend, a former college roommate named Kenshi. Hiroshi's team had done their homework. Kenshi and Sako met up to drink only rarely, but they'd kept in touch. By coincidence, the real Kenshi was away on assignment in Osaka this week, giving Hiroshi the opening he needed. He'd sent a cryptic text from Kenshi's phone, lifted by Madoka's hacking, to Sako that afternoon, in town for a night, let's catch up at our old spot. Sako's reply, equal parts surprise and eagerness, had sealed the plan. Now Hiroshi tugged a worn baseball cap low on his head and donned a voice modulation patch at his throat. He glanced at his phone's blank screen, catching his reflection. He was Kenshi to the life, down to the faint scar on the chin and the crow's feet at the eyes. To further ensure success, a colorfully feathered Pokémon perched unseen on the fire escape overhead. Daisy the Gardevoir had cast a subtle psychic veil around Hiroshi. In the eyes of any onlooker, the disguise would be perfect. Even Seiko's potentially hazy, drunken perception would be gently nudged to see his old friend. Daisy's telepathic presence also hovered at the edge of Hiroshi's mind, monitoring Seiko's emotional state from afar. Ready when you are, her thought brushed against Hiroshi's, calm and reassuring. Hiroshi drew a slow breath, centering himself. This was a delicate psychological dance. He needed Sako vulnerable and remorseful, not defensive. With a final adjustment of his cap, he pocketed a small vial of clear liquid, a powerful truth serum diluted to be just potent enough when mixed with alcohol, and strode out of the alley toward the bar's entrance. A jangling bell announced Kenshi's arrival as Hiroshi pushed open the door. Inside, the izakaya was dim and cozy. Lacquered wood counters, red paper lanterns swaying gently in the draft. Only a couple of patrons sat in corners. Sako occupied the far end of the counter, shoulders slumped. He blinked blearily at the newcomer. Hiroshi flashed a broad grin that he'd practiced from photos and videos of Kenshi. "Oi, Sako," he called in a warm, familiar tone. "Long time no see, old pal." Sako's eyes widened in disbelief, then delight. "Kenshi. You actually came," he stammered. He stood, nearly tipping his stool in his haste. I can't believe you're here. In 2 strides Hiroji was upon him, pulling Sako into a backslapping hug. Had to surprise you, didn't I? He laughed. Up close, the reek of whiskey on Sako's breath was evident. His speech was loose, he was already tipsy. Good. That would only make this easier. They settled at the counter, side by side. Hiroji signaled the bartender. Whatever he's having, 1 for me, and another for him. He shot Sako a teasing smirk. You started without me, you dog. Sako chuckled guiltily. Sorry, rough day at work, could not wait. He drained the last of his current glass. But now you're here. By all means, let's catch up. As the bartender turned to fix drinks, Hiroji's hand moved in a practiced blur. He tipped the vial of odorless drug into the fresh pour intended for Sako, a dose calculated by their team medic to loosen tongues and blur short-term memory, nothing more. The amber whiskey foamed slightly, then settled. Hiroji clinked his own glass to Sako's when the drinks arrived. Kenpai, my friend. They drank. Sako downed half his whiskey in 1 swig, sighing in contentment at the burn. Hiroji sipped lightly at his, merely wetting his lips. He needed a clear head. The mask's voice modulator mimicked Kenshi's gravelly tone perfectly as he launched into small talk. How's life treating you, Sako? You've got that fancy government job. Still catching bad guys and saving the world, he joked. Sako gave a hollow laugh, swirling his glass. Something like that. Paperwork and meetings mostly. It's not all glamour, Kenshi. He peered at Kenshi's face, eyes glassy yet searching. What about you? Still with the Trade Ministry. Osaka branch, yes, Hiroji lied smoothly, drawing on the cover story they'd prepared. Boring stuff. I envy you, you know. Working in Tokyo, in intelligence. Must be exciting. Sako grimaced, then gulped the rest of his whiskey. Exciting, sure. His words slurred slightly. The serum was taking hold, lowering his inhibitions. Sometimes too exciting. Hiroji cast his line gently. He let a moment of silence hang, then spoke in a softer, concerned voice. You mentioned it's been rough lately. Something on your mind, man? You know you can tell me anything. We go back 20 years. He clapped a reassuring hand on Sako's shoulder. Sako's face worked as if he were chewing over a secret. His eyes unfocused, staring into the rows of bottles behind the bar. Kenshi, ever feel like you did something real bad, but you had no choice? His words were barely above a whisper. Hiroji felt a cold twist of triumph in his gut. The guilt was rising. He kept his expression gently curious. We all make hard choices. But if it's eating at you, maybe it wasn't the right call, he murmured. What happened? Sako swallowed. A sheen of tears made his eyes wet. Hypothetically, say you knew some guys at work doing wrong. And you let it happen. Because they're powerful and you're. He bit off the rest, shaking his head violently. Never mind. Sorry, that was stupid. He tried to laugh it off, but it turned into a choked sob. The bartender glanced over in concern, but Hiroji shot him a quick smile. I've got this. The bartender politely busied himself away from the emotional scene. Hiroji gently slid Sako's empty glass away and pushed a fresh drink, with the second dose deftly added, into his hand. No judgment here, Sako. Sounds like you've been carrying something heavy. I'm all ears, and it stays between us, promise. Chapter 62, Masquerade of Guilt, 2. Sako stared at the new drink, then at Kenshi. The recognition of a true friend's face, or what he believed was one, eroded his remaining defenses. With a trembling exhale, Sako began to speak, voice hushed and broken. I messed up, Kenshi. I did things I never thought I would. God. He raked a hand through his hair. There are people in my agency, bad people. But they made it seem justified at first. For Japan's security, they said. Then it became about money, favors, threats. He took a desperate gulp of his drink. I leaked documents. Buried reports. People got hurt. Killed. Seiko's face crumpled as a tear slid down his cheek. Do you remember Officer Kinoshita? My Kaoruhei from a few years back. Hiroshi nodded, recalling from the team's records that Kinoshita was one of the honest PSIA officers killed in a delayed raid not long ago. I remember. Nice guy, Hiroshi said quietly. In truth, he remembered attending Kinoshita's funeral undercover, watching his family weep all while suspecting traitors like Sako had a hand in it. Now Sako confirmed it, he's dead, because of me. The dam broke. Words came tumbling out between ragged breaths. I knew the raid was compromised. I knew and I didn't warn him. They told me to stall the team. I filed a false report that the intel was incomplete. By the time they went in, he squeezed his eyes shut. The ambush. Kinoshita and the others never had a chance. And those bastards, Takeda and Mori, they just laughed after, like it was a game. I can still hear them laughing. Seiko's voice cracked with anguish. Hiroshi's hand curled into a fist beneath the counter. Hearing it confirmed the betrayal that cost brave men their lives, made his blood burn. But he forced himself to remain in character, radiating compassion. He placed a firm grip on Seiko's shoulder to steady the shaking man. My God! I'm so sorry, he said, voice thick as if in shock. You couldn't have known they'd. That's awful. Sako hiccuped a sob. I wanted to come forward, to tell the internal affairs or someone. But it was too late. I'm in so deep. They'd brand me a traitor too. Maybe I deserve it. His head hung in shame. Hiroshi glanced around. No one else was near. Quietly, he slid a slim recording device deeper inside his jacket pocket, ensuring it caught every word. It was risky, such a recording might never see a courtroom given how it was obtained, but the intelligence value was immense. His team could use this to map the conspirators' hierarchy and even confront Sako later to flip him as a witness. He gently probed for more. These people. Takeda and Mori, you said? They're running everything. Sako gave a jerky nod. Takeda's at the top in our branch. Mori, Kitamura, several section heads all in on it. They get orders from outside sometimes, some businessman or foreigners, I don't know. I'm not high enough to meet those. He sniffed, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. I only talked directly with Chief Mori and that snake Itagaki from Tech Division. They'd tell me what to do. Hiroshi's mind raced. Itagaki, that was the tech chief who leaked research to Shige conglomerate, flagged in their investigation. Good, another link confirmed. Have you ever met any of the outside contacts? Anyone at all? He asked softly. Seiko's brow furrowed in concentration. The drug and alcohol made his thoughts slow. No, just passed files through drops or to couriers. Except, there was one time. He lowered his voice further, as if even here he feared being overheard. A foreigner approached me after a conference once, knew everything about me. Called himself Jackal. Hiroshi had to fight not to stiffen in surprise. Jackal, the rogue Western intelligence broker known to be involved. Sako kept talking, oblivious to Hiroshi's heightened attention. Jackal gave me a phone, told me to use it if I ever needed direct help. I never did. Too scared. Mori would have killed me if I spoke to outsiders without approval. I threw the phone in the river. He laughed bitterly. Didn't trust him either. One devil at a time, right? Hiroshi nodded slowly. This was crucial intel. Jackal had personally tried to recruit in the branch. That could help Makima and Yoshimura later track that operative's trail. But for now, Hiroshi refocused on Seiko's personal torment. The man was staring into his empty glass, eyes haunted. "What am I gonna do, Kenshi?" Sako whispered, voice small and lost. "If this all comes out, I'm finished. My life's ruined. Maybe I deserve it, but my family," he broke off, shuddering. Hiroshi felt a pang of actual pity mingled with contempt. Sako had chosen cowardice and greed over integrity, and innocent people paid the price. Yet in this moment, he was a human being crushed by guilt. That guilt was a weapon Hiroshi intended to use fully. He tightened his arm around Sako in a brotherly half-hug. "Listen to me," he murmured, leaning close. "You made mistakes, but you're not beyond saving. If the truth comes out, maybe you come clean. Testify against those higher ups. It might be risky, but it could be the only way to make this right." Sako looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Testify? They'd never let me live to see a courtroom." He swallowed hard, throat bobbing. "Those people, they have hitmen, foreign assassins on speed dial. I don't think I have the courage." Hiroshi gave him a gentle shake. "Then find it, Sako. You're better than them, at least you still feel something. Those monsters you follow, they don't feel anything." The words came out with more force than intended, a slice of Hiroshi's true anger slipping in. He softened his tone. "If you can't fight back for yourself, do it for Kinoshita. For the people you feel you've wronged." Seiko's face crumpled again. He covered it with his hands. "Kinoshita, oh God! I'm sorry," he moaned into his palms. His shoulders shook as years of pent-up remorse poured out in drunken tears. Chapter 63, Masquerade of Guilt, 3. Hiroshi let him sob quietly for a minute, glancing at the bartender with an apologetic smile and a subtle signal to pour a glass of water. The bartender slid one over. When Seiko's racking sobs slowed, Hiroshi pressed the water into his friend's hands. "Drink. Easy now." Sako sipped, hiccuping. He looked utterly drained, but a hint of relief flickered across his face. Confession even to a false friend had lightened a fraction of the burden. He managed a weak smile. "Thanks for listening, man. I missed you." "I'm here anytime," Hiroshi replied, patting his back. Inside, though, his mind was already cataloguing everything Sako had revealed. Vital links had been extracted, confirmation of the traitor's inner circle, mention of Jackal, and the emotional state of a mole who might turn witness with the right pressure. When Sako finally stumbled off his stool to head home, Hiroshi was at his side, supporting him. "I called you a taxi," he lied as they emerged into the cool night air. In truth, Angel, one of Hiroshi's operatives, would tail the taxi at a safe distance to ensure Sako got home without incident and didn't do anything drastic in despair. They couldn't have him harming himself or warning others. Not yet. Sako clung to Kenshi's arm, blinking at him with bleary gratitude. "We'll catch up again soon, right?" he asked hopefully. Hiroshi forced a warm grin even as guilt pricked at him for the deception. "Of course. You take care of yourself, Sako. And, hang in there. Things will get better." As the taxi pulled up and the woozy traitor sank into the back seat, Hiroshi pressed a folded note into his hand. On it was written the number of a secure tip line managed by Makima's office. "If it gets too heavy and you need to talk or do the right thing, call this, okay?" he said. Sako squinted at the number, then at his friend. Perhaps some part of him realized this was too organized, too prepared. But the thought floated away in his alcoholic haze. He just nodded, clutching the note. "Okay. Thank you." The door shut. As the taxi drove off, Hiroshi stood under the flickering neon and watched it disappear around the corner. Only then did he peel off the latex mask with a grim sigh. Mission accomplished. Sako would awaken tomorrow with only fuzzy memories of tonight's conversation, likely dismissing it as a drunken blur, perhaps even doubting he'd said so much. The subtle psychic nudge Daisy had implanted would encourage him to rationalize it away as a moment of emotional weakness with an old friend. He would not realize he had given up the conspiracy's secrets to the very fox stalking their henhouse. Daisy dropped lightly from the fire escape and landed beside Hiroshi. Her red eyes glowed softly in the dark as she regarded him, sensing the conflict in his heart. He is in great pain, she conveyed silently of Sako. Hiroshi exhaled, releasing the tension from his shoulders as he nodded. I know. But he chose his path. Then his brow set in determination. At least now his pain will help bring down those truly responsible. The Gardevoir's delicate hand touched Hiroshi's arm in quiet solidarity. Together, they vanished into the alley shadows. It was time to return to the safe house and add tonight's haul to their growing mountain of evidence. The noose around the traitors' necks was almost fully drawn and they still had no idea. Chapter 64, Covered Operations Montage. While Hiroshi played the penitent friend that evening, his teammates were hard at work tightening other strands of the web. Each member of the team continued their ordinary public duties by day, only to slip into covered roles by night, executing carefully crafted maneuvers to gain deeper access and sow confusion among the enemy. At dawn, Special Agent Yoshimura stood on the rooftop of a half-abandoned office building, a steaming paper cup of coffee in hand. The old operative's silhouette was still against the graying sky as he surveyed the waking city below. Far off, the first trains rattled and a few neon signs buzzed out. Yoshimura could have been mistaken for a salaryman enjoying a quiet break, but the small earpiece in his ear and the encrypted phone in his other hand told a different story. Confirm extraction window, Yoshimura said lowly into the phone, his gravelly voice carrying the authority of decades in the field. A crackle, then a reply, target will exit the Trade Ministry at 7:45. Team A in position. Yoshimura took a sip of his coffee, its warmth cutting through the early chill. Below, a government sedan pulled up along a curb as commuters trickled in. The target was a foreign intelligence officer embedded under diplomatic cover in the Trade Department, a key conduit for funneling stolen technology out of Japan. If the traitors in PSIA caught wind of the coming purge, that spy would bolt for his embassy or, worse, attempt a violent diversion. Yoshimura wasn't going to allow either. Team B, he queried next. Another voice answered, ready at second checkpoint in case he rabbits, sir. Yoshimura allowed himself a small, tight smile. Execute on my mark, now. Across the street, the unsuspecting foreign trade attaché emerged, punctual as ever, from the ministry doors. At Yoshimura's word, a van's side door slid open 30 meters down the block. In a flash of well-practiced choreography, two figures in utility worker uniforms intercepted the man as he headed for his sedan. One pretended to stumble with a stack of boxes, causing the spy to halt, the other struck with a swift injection to the neck. To any distant observer, it looked like the man collapsed from an abrupt fainting spell. The workers caught him under the arms with concerned shouts, hustling him toward their van for medical help. In less than 10 seconds, the street was empty again, the spy's chauffeur still around the corner, none the wiser that his passenger had been snatched off the street. High above, Yoshimura heard the confirmation in his ear, package secured. He closed his eyes briefly, releasing a breath. One more snake, caught and bagged. Understood. Quiet transport to Site Echo. Hold for debrief there, he responded. Site Echo was an off-grid safe house he'd prepared to stash high-value catches. The foreign agent would wake bound and blindfolded, and by the time anyone noticed his absence, the main purge would be underway. Yoshimura took another sip of coffee, savoring the moment. One by one, the enemies were being declawed. This particular operative would no longer be able to orchestrate last-minute escapes for the traitors or feed them intel about any political fallout. And he was just one of many targets Yoshimura was juggling. Even as he watched the van blend into traffic, he was dialing another secure line, this one to an Interpol liaison. "This is Greyhound," Yoshimura spoke, using his old code name. "Is Canary in position for tonight?" A posh British accent crackled back, "Affirmative." "Warehouse by the docks, midnight." "We'll be ready." Yoshimura nodded to himself. That warehouse by the docks was slated to host a black market Pokémon egg exchange, terrorists and brokers trading bioweapons under cover of darkness. It was one of the illicit deals the traders had been protecting for months. Not tonight. Tonight, Yoshimura's off-grid strike force with a little Interpol help would hit it preemptively, dismantling the black market cell before they ever realized PSIA's house was being cleaned. He ended the call and glanced at the brightening horizon. In a few minutes he'd slip away, unseen, to reconvene with his loyal shadow teams. They respected him like a general, even if officially he had no command. Limited resources, he mused, rolling his stiff shoulder, but the right people. Each operator under him had been cherry-picked for loyalty and kept totally off the compromised grid. They moved on burner phones, face-to-face briefings, and old-fashioned trust. Yoshimura wouldn't be able to call in helicopters or SWAT vans when the time came, but he would have boots on the ground at every critical point, outside embassies to intercept fleeing diplomats turned spies, at airports to halt traders or their foreign allies trying to slip out, and in the shadows beside police units about to raid extremist hideouts enabled by the conspiracy. He took one last gulp of coffee and crushed the cup in his fist. This purge would be total. No one who had conspired, whether in silk suit or anonymous mask, would escape the dragnet he and Makima had woven. He allowed himself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. Then Yoshimura turned on his heel and vanished down the rooftop stairwell, leaving only the faint smell of roasted beans and victory on the breeze. Chapter 65, Covert Operations Montage, 2. Meanwhile, across town in the glass and steel high-rise of the Shinomiya Group, two maintenance workers pushed a supply cart down a pristine hallway. The Shinomiya Board of Directors was convening an emergency meeting about some pressing budget concerns, and the entire floor was a frenzy of suits and secretaries. It was the perfect cover for Aki Hayakawa and Denji to slip in unnoticed. Aki, dressed in an ill-fitting grey janitor uniform, kept his expression stoic as he guided the cart. Inside lay an array of cleaning supplies and concealed beneath them, a satchel of surveillance gadgets. Denji followed, grumbling under his breath about having to wear a fake mustache as part of his disguise. "This thing itches," he muttered, scratching at the prosthetic. "Quiet," Aki hissed. "We're almost at the boardroom." Daisy's psychic illusion was doing its work, a mild suggestion in every passerby's mind that these two were nothing more than invisible help. Even so, Aki's heart thumped steadily. They had precious minutes to plant the last wave of bugs in Shinomiya's lair of corruption. As they neared the double doors of the boardroom, a knot of Shinomiya executives swept past, deep in argument. Denji seized the moment. He accidentally tipped the supply cart, sending a mop and bucket clattering noisily across the marble floor. Water and suds spilled everywhere, and one executive let out an annoyed yelp as the mop whacked his shoe. "What the?" the man barked. "Sumimasen. So sorry." Denji yelped in an exaggerated accent, bowing repeatedly. He shuffled in the puddle, making a comical mess of trying to gather the mop. A few of the directors stepped back, disgusted, but one middle-aged woman softened at the sight of the apparently hapless cleaner. "Just clean it up quickly," she said curtly, waving the others on. "We're late." They skirted around the spill, paying no attention to Aki, who had used the distraction to slip right up to the boardroom doors. In one smooth motion, he slid a credit card-sized listening device under the door and affixed it to the interior wall with a magnetic click. Simultaneously, he pulled a tiny USB stick from his sleeve and inserted it into the electronic lock panel beside the door. A green light blinked. Kobane's malware uploading to the building's security system. Now they would have camera access and recording control in this entire wing. Denji continued his pantomime of clumsiness until the executives disappeared into a nearby conference room, instead likely relocating due to the spill. As soon as the coast was clear, he instantly straightened, dropping the buffoon act. The two exchanged a quick triumphant nod. "Phase done," Aki whispered, retrieving the now uploaded USB. Denji couldn't resist a toothy grin. "Too easy. I was hoping a guard would try to stop us." "I've got pent-up energy to burn," he whispered back. Aki rolled his eyes and jerked his thumb for Denji to grab the card and move. Before any security could round the corner, the two janitors had vanished down the service elevator. Up above, Shinomiya's directors began their meeting, unaware that every word would be fed to the safe house servers in real time. Later that day, Power and Himeno executed another gambit in a far more elegant setting. Under the glittering chandeliers of the Imperial Hotel's banquet hall, a prestigious biotech conference cocktail hour was in full swing. Power, dressed in a slinky black evening gown that contrasted shockingly with her unruly red hair, lounged by the bar, swirling a glass of cranberry juice as if it were fine wine. Across the room, Dr. Schneider, the bespectacled ringmaster scientist turned trafficker, was holding court with a group of gullible investors, boasting in accented Japanese about his latest revolutionary research. At precisely 8 p.m., Himeno made her entrance. She was the picture of cosmopolitan allure, a slim navy blue dress suit, hair swept into a stylish chignon, a string of pearls at her neck. In one hand she carried a half-empty champagne flute, in the other, a briefcase. As she glided into Schneider's orbit, Power caught her eye and gave the subtlest nod. Everything was in place, time to spring the honey trap. Schneider noticed Himeno almost immediately. His gaze lingered on the confident woman who appeared to be just tipsy enough. Himeno staggered ever so slightly against a chair, and a concerned waiter moved to assist her. Schneider, emboldened by the possibility of easy prey, dismissed his audience with a flourish and stepped toward her. "Pardon me, are you all right?" he inquired in English, feigning gentlemanly concern while eyeing the brass-handled briefcase she carried. Himeno blinked slowly, as if focusing through a haze. "Oh. Thank you, I'm fine," she replied in fluent English, slurring just a touch. "These hotel floors are so polished, aren't they?" She smiled disarmingly. Schneider chuckled, continuing in English, "Indeed. Allow me to introduce myself, Dr. Klaus Schneider." Himeno's eyes lit up in feigned recognition. "Schneider? The biotech genius Schneider." She giggled and leaned in conspiratorially. "What a lucky coincidence. I didn't think you'd actually be here." The scientist's ego visibly inflated. "You flatter me. And you are?" Himeno placed a hand delicately on his forearm. "Sophia. Sophia Yamamoto. A carefully crafted alias. I represent a private buyer from the Middle East. They told me to find the best in Pokémon bioengineering," she purred. "Your name was top of the list." Schneider's eyes gleamed with greed. He ushered her to a quieter corner, practically tripping over himself to pull out a chair for her. Power casually shifted position to keep them in view, one hand resting inside her clutch where a concealed recording device was monitoring everything. Chapter 66, Covert Operations Montage, 3. Himeno placed a hand delicately on his forearm. "Sophia. Sophia Yamamoto. A carefully crafted alias. I represent a private buyer from the Middle East. They told me to find the best in Pokémon bioengineering," she purred. "Your name was top of the list." Schneider's eyes gleamed with greed. He ushered her to a quieter corner, practically tripping over himself to pull out a chair for her. Power casually shifted position to keep them in view, one hand resting inside her clutch where a concealed recording device was monitoring everything. Within minutes, Himeno had Schneider wrapped around her finger. With a deft mixture of flirtation and business, she enticed him into bragging about his work. A fresh bottle of champagne arrived, courtesy of Power, posing as a hotel staffer briefly to ensure it made its way over. As Schneider refilled Himeno's glass, she laughed and touched his knee lightly under the table. Our principals are interested in, shall we say, unregulated Pokémon enhancements. Combat applications. She let her voice dip suggestively. Money, of course, is no object. But they require proof that your technology delivers. Schneider smirked, adjusting his glasses. My dear, I can do more than proof. I can demonstrate. The Shij conglomerate's fools never understood, but my research is beyond cutting edge. He checked that no one was eavesdropping. They weren't. The nearest guests were conveniently drawn away by a small illusion Daisy projected of a spilled drink. Schneider leaned closer, lowering his voice. I have in my possession a prototype gene splicer that can imbue ordinary soldiers with Pokémon abilities. It works. I tested it myself on volunteers. Himeno feigned astonishment, eyes wide. Incredible. And you could deliver such a device to my buyers. He tapped the briefcase by her chair. If the price is right. I suspect what you have in there will suffice. His gaze burned with avarice. Himeno gave a coy smile, popping open the case just enough for him to glimpse stacks of cash and a glint of data drives. In reality, the money was real but seeded with a die pack and a tracker, and the drives contained convincingly doctored cryptocurrency tokens, all part of the sting. 5 million USD equivalent, as a down payment, she whispered. The rest after delivery. Schneider's breath hitched. He reached for his wine, hand trembling with excitement. Agreed, he rasped, not even haggling. We can arrange the exchange privately. Here he pulled a card and scribbled an address. Tomorrow night, midnight. A lab in Yokohama. I'll have the device, and other inventory you may find interesting. We'll do a full showcase. Himeno took the card, her mission complete. She downed the last of her champagne and stood. Marvelous. I shall report your terms. Oh, and Doctor, she leaned in to brush a phantom speck off his tie, locking eyes with a sultry smile. I look forward to doing great business together. As Himeno sauntered off, Schneider remained seated, dazzled and unaware he had just incriminated himself 6 ways to Sunday on tape. Power slipped out a minute later, having recorded every word and even snagged a photo of Schneider ogling the briefcase, evidence of intent to sell illegal biotech. The honey trap had been executed flawlessly. By midnight, Power and Himeno regrouped at a surveillance van, where Madoka gleefully began backing up the footage. He spilled everything, Power cackled, kicking her feet up on the console. Himeno had him drooling like a monkey on a banana. Himeno smirked as she peeled off her fake pearl necklace, which was actually a string of tiny cameras. Men like that always do. Egos and libido, simple switches to flip. She paused, a flicker of distaste crossing her face now that Schneider was out of sight. Ugh. I need a shower though. Playing nice with that creep made my skin crawl. You earned it, Madoka said, already sending the recorded files to the safe house server. This is the nail in Shij's coffin, proof their contracted scientist is trafficking tech and Pokémon bioweapons. The prosecutors will have a field day. Chapter 67, Covert Operations Montage, 4. Elsewhere that night, Agent Kobani Higashiyama crept through the hushed hallways of the PSIA headquarters, disguised in an oversized janitorial jumpsuit and cap. Her heart pounded so loudly in her ears she was sure it would echo off the marble floors. Please don't let anyone notice, she prayed silently. In one gloved hand she clutched a feather duster, in the other, concealed up her sleeve, was a matchbook-sized bugging device. Ahead lay the door to the 12th floor executive boardroom, one of the few places they hadn't yet wired, simply because it was so frequently occupied by high-level traders. But at this late hour, the room was dark and empty. Still, as Kobani approached, keys jingling on her belt, she nearly jumped out of her skin when a voice rang out behind her, "You there? Cleaning's not scheduled for this floor tonight." Kobani froze. Slowly, she turned, forcing a blank, servile expression. A security guard was eyeing her suspiciously, one hand hovering near the holster on his hip. Oh, Kobani stammered, bowing so quickly her cap nearly fell off. Sumimasen. The deputy director SP spilled coffee earlier. They asked me to do a quick clean so it doesn't stain. She winced internally. She'd blurted out the first excuse that came to mind. Please buy it, please. The guard frowned, but coffee stains were plausible. Strange, I didn't hear about that, he muttered, stepping closer. Kobani's palms went clammy. She could feel sweat trickling down her back. One wrong move and this guard might radio upstairs and half the mission could collapse. She bowed again, holding out her duster as if it were proof of her station. I am new, sir. Just following orders. She added a self-deprecating smile. Maybe they didn't log it. I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to be here alone. She dared to meet his eyes briefly before dropping hers again. Something in her meekness disarmed him. He sighed. All right. Just be quick. And don't get locked in the doors auto-secure at midnight. With that, he gave a curt nod and continued down the corridor on his patrol, boots echoing. Kobani nearly collapsed from relief. That was too close. Taking a steadying breath, she slipped into the boardroom. The lights were off, but the city's glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows provided enough illumination. She hurried to the long mahogany conference table. With trembling fingers, she tucked the bug device up beneath the lip of the table's edge, pressing the adhesive firmly until a green light blinked once. Connection established. She dared not linger. On her way out, she noticed something on the sideboard, a framed photo of Director Takeda shaking hands with a foreign general. Kobani felt a flash of anger. Traitor, she thought, imagining the hidden deals likely represented by that handshake. In a surge of boldness, she plucked the photo frame off the sideboard and sprayed a fine mist of cleaning solution over the glass, a pretext if anyone asked why she was in here. As she wiped it, she covertly attached a tiny magnetized camera to the metal frame stand. Now they'd even have a live feed if traitors met in this room. Satisfied, Kobani placed the frame back. When she slipped out into the hallway, the guard was gone. She almost cried with relief as the elevator doors shut behind her. The adrenaline left her legs weak. But she managed a tiny smile of pride. She had done it. Another bug, another stream of truth flowing into their hands. Maybe I'm not so hopeless after all, she thought. Back in the safe house van, Aki's voice came through her earpiece, cool and steady. Good work, Kobani. We see the feed clear. She exhaled a quiet, shaky laugh and responded, heading back now. Not all operations were so tense. Some were downright devious in their simplicity. Angel, the serene young agent, spent the day monitoring the traitors' communications from a safe house terminal, fingers gliding over multiple keyboards. At one point he intercepted a flurry of emails between two nervous conspirators discussing a suspected data breach in their secure network. Angel smirked and promptly drafted a fake memo from the cybersecurity department blaming an outside hacker for the anomalies, complete with fabricated technical jargon. Misinformation as a weapon. The panicked traitors breathed a collective sigh of relief at the memo and even redoubled their efforts to secure the wrong systems, leaving the team's actual intrusions untouched. To sell the ruse completely, Makima authorized a public scapegoat. A hapless temp employee was arrested on suspicion of being the hacker's inside man. News of the arrest was circulated through official channels the very next day. The traitors, thinking the threat was contained, eagerly returned to business as usual behind closed doors, unaware that every whisper was being recorded by concealed ears. The innocent temp, of course, would be quietly released once this was all over, a regrettable pawn in a greater game. Chapter 68, Covered Operations Montage, v. Satisfied, Kobani placed the frame back. When she slipped out into the hallway, the guard was gone. She almost cried with relief as the elevator doors shut behind her. The adrenaline left her legs weak. But she managed a tiny smile of pride. She had done it. Another bug, another stream of truth flowing into their hands. Maybe I'm not so hopeless after all, she thought. Back in the safe house van, Aki's voice came through her earpiece, cool and steady. Good work, Kobani. We see the feed clear. She exhaled a quiet, shaky laugh and responded, heading back now. Not all operations were so tense. Some were downright devious in their simplicity. Angel, the serene young agent, spent the day monitoring the trader's communications from a safe house terminal, fingers gliding over multiple keyboards. At one point he intercepted a flurry of emails between two nervous conspirators discussing a suspected data breach in their secure network. Angel smirked and promptly drafted a fake memo from the cybersecurity department blaming an outside hacker for the anomalies, complete with fabricated technical jargon. Misinformation as a weapon. The panicked traders breathed a collective sigh of relief at the memo and even redoubled their efforts to secure the wrong systems, leaving the team's actual intrusions untouched. To sell the ruse completely, Makima authorized a public scapegoat. A hapless temp employee was arrested on suspicion of being the hacker's inside man. News of the arrest was circulated through official channels the very next day. The traders, thinking the threat was contained, eagerly returned to business as usual behind closed doors, unaware that every whisper was being recorded by concealed ears. The innocent temp, of course, would be quietly released once this was all over, a regrettable pawn in a greater game. In another case, Aki set a trap for a wavering mole. One mid-level analyst, a quiet man named Hayes, had been coerced into spying but was having second thoughts. Hiroshi's intel said Hayes had a young daughter and was only in this mess from blackmail. To tip him over the edge, Aki left a forged photograph on Hayes's desk one evening. The photo showed a little girl's charred backpack amid rubble, a supposed victim of a terrorist bombing enabled by leaked intel. It came with a note, "Your work did this." In truth, the image was a fabrication, no such bombing had occurred yet. But the next morning, Aki watched from behind a one-way mirror as Hayes discovered it. The man's face went ashen, he darted anxious looks around, then hurriedly pocketed the photo, eyes brimming. Aki trailed discreetly as Hayes fled to an empty stairwell, where the tormented analyst thought himself alone. There, Hayes sank to the steps, head in hands, overcome by guilt. "What have I done?" Aki heard him whisper, voice cracking. The surveillance tap on Hayes's phone showed he immediately tried calling Chief Mori, likely to confess or seek reassurance, but Mori didn't answer. The team had intercepted that call and sent it straight to a dead line. Growing desperate, Hayes then dialed another number, the PSIA Internal Affairs tip line Makima had rerouted to a secure cell. Angel, monitoring communications, alerted Aki through the comms. "He's calling IA, hooking you in, Aki." Aki pressed a finger to his hidden earpiece and answered Hayes's call with a crisp, neutral tone. "PSIA Internal Affairs, anonymous reporting line." Hayes, breathing hard, stammered out, I need to report corruption. I have evidence, please, it's life or death." Aki kept him talking, gentle but firm, drawing out details of Mori's coercion and the foreign handlers who had threatened Hayes's family. The analyst spilled his soul in that stairwell, tears mixing with relief that he might be doing the right thing at last. All of it was recorded, and more importantly, Hayes agreed to cooperate fully if it meant protection for him and his family. By the end of the call, Aki had secured another nail in the trader's coffin, a live insider willing to testify when the time came. And all it had taken was a forged photo to tip a guilty conscience over the edge. As dusk fell on the eve of the planned purge, the battlefield had been painstakingly shaped. Every critical location was bugged or surveilled. Key conspirators had either exposed themselves, been led into traps, or lulled into complacency. Each trader still believed they were in control, that their naive assistant director and his motley crew of newcomers posed no threat. They congratulated themselves on neutralizing phantom hackers and indulged in bribes and backroom deals, unaware their every move was documented. And if any did harbor last-minute suspicions, the team swiftly moved to pacify them. One corrupt embassy liaison who grew paranoid found herself seduced by a false promise of promotion overseas courtesy of a letter forged by power which diverted her attention entirely. Another traitor, a deputy cabinet secretary, nearly went AWOL with a stash of data. Yoshimura's men made sure his car had an accident that landed him in a hospital bed under guard, conveniently unable to flee. No more loose ends. By the time the city's lights blinked on that night, the stage was set and the trap was moments from snapping shut. All that remained was to assemble the fruits of their labor, double-check every fact and file, and ensure nothing, absolutely nothing, could slip through a legal crack. For that final review, an outsider had joined their secret war council. Chapter 69, Safe House War Room and Legal Strategy. Far beneath Tokyo's busy streets, in a concrete labyrinth known only to a select few, the safe house war room hummed with a muted energy. The usual haze of cigarette smoke hung in the stale air, and paper coffee cups littered the long steel table at the center. The wall of monitors glowed with live feeds, emails scrolling, security cam footage from PSIA hallways, a map with blinking dots representing targets under watch. On one screen, Sako could be seen passed out in his living room, oblivious to the secret camera that Angel had patched into his smart TV. On another, an audio waveform pulsed with the snores of Chief Mori in his office, recorded by Kobani's freshly planted boardroom bug. Every piece was in play. Hiroshi stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, a stern look of concentration on his youthful face. Dark crescents shadowed his eyes. None of them had slept more than a couple hours per night this week. But there was no time to rest yet. "All right," he said quietly, yet everyone heard him in the stillness. "Let's go over what we have. We need to be absolutely sure." Before anyone could begin, a gruff voice cut through the silence, "You have almost everything you need." All heads turned to the corner of the room, where a figure emerged from behind a filing cabinet, stepping into the light. He was a man in his early 60s, clad in a rumpled charcoal suit that had clearly seen long years of service. His thick grey hair was combed back severely, and a faint scar ran from his temple to cheek. He carried himself with the weary authority of someone who had spent too many late nights poring over legal briefs and too many early mornings in courtrooms. This was Tachibana, the seasoned lawyer Makima had deployed to the team. With a decades-honed scowl and a perpetual slight stoop, he looked more like a cantankerous grandfather than a razor-sharp legal mind until one met his eyes. They were hawkish and bright, flicking over the team with keen appraisal. Denji, who had been leaning half asleep against the wall, straightened up. "Geez, old man, didn't your mother teach you not to lurk?" he blurted, rubbing his eyes. Power snickered, and even Aki hid a smirk behind his hand. They'd only met Tachibana the previous night, and his brusque manner had already rubbed Denji the wrong way. Tachibana snorted, unfazed. "If you'd done your job to perfection, kid, I wouldn't need to lurk." He stepped up to the table, tossing a thick accordion folder onto it with a thump. "Makima sent me to make sure all this evidence you've collected doesn't fall apart the moment it sees the inside of a courtroom." Kishive uncrossed his arms, fixing his one good eye on the lawyer. "We appreciate your help, Tachibana-sensei," he said diplomatically, the honorific rolling off his tongue as a subtle reprimand to Denji's informal tone. "We all want airtight cases." Tachibana grunted in acknowledgement. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a pair of battered reading glasses, perching them on his nose. "Let's see what you've got so far," he said, voice gravelly from years of late-night cigars. Hiroshi handed him a tablet with a summary of the compiled evidence. As Tachibana scrolled, his brow furrowed deeply. The team waited in tense silence. They all knew how much they had gathered, but also sensed what was coming. This man had a reputation for finding loopholes and weak links before the enemy could. After a few minutes, Tachibana set the tablet down. He fixed the group with a hard stare. Impressive spread. Bank transfers, illicit communications, even some confessions caught on tape. His gaze slid to Hiroshi and narrowed. One such confession from a drunk section chief, if I read correctly. Hiroshi inclined his head. Yes. Chief Sako. He gave us confirmations of the chain of command and named other traitors. The lawyer sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. And did you Mirandize this Sako before he spilled his guts to his friend? He asked sarcastically. Hiroshi stiffened. It wasn't a formal interrogation. It was an undercover sting. Tachibana held up a hand. I know. And frankly, I don't give a damn about his rights in this context. I only care how a judge will see it. He tapped the tablet screen where an audio file was listed, the Sako recording. A defense attorney will say this was entrapment, coercion under intoxication, hearsay since it was to a third party, etc. That recording might not be admissible evidence at all. Kobani's face fell. But it's true. He basically confessed to treason. Tachibana gave her a surprisingly gentle look. Miss Higashiyama, we know it's true. But court isn't about truth alone, it's about proof that's legally clean. We have to be prepared to lose some pieces if they were obtained in murky ways. He turned to Madoka and Angel. Your hacked email trove, for instance. Excellent intel. But the method? Unauthorized intrusion into communications. A defense lawyer will move to suppress that as an illegal search if we can't tie it to a proper warrant or an exigent circumstance exception. Madoka adjusted his glasses nervously. Makima will arrange retroactive warrants, won't she? National security and all. Tachibana shrugged. She's pulled favors, but we can't count on judges rubber stamping everything. Some of these judges are as compromised as the traitors. We do this by the book. He jabbed a finger at the printed screenshots of bank transfers spread on the table courtesy of Aki and Madoka's data digs. These bank records, did you obtain them through legal subpoena? Aki's jaw tightened. We acquired them through a backdoor in the bank's system. To map the flow quickly. The lawyer nodded as if that was expected. All right. First thing, we'll need to secure official copies of those records through the special prosecutor's office at the moment of the bust. I'll coordinate that. Already have some friendly contacts there ready. But you must ensure the chain of custody is clear. That means the instant the raids happen, agents with proper authority should seize the original documents or servers with those records. These printouts won't cut it alone. He scribbled a note on a pad, subpoena banks Shinomiya and Shige accounts. Aki nodded, taking his point. Understood. We'll capture the servers and hard drives during the raid. And our bank contacts can be waiting with certified copies. Tachibana allowed a hint of approval. Good. Now, about the recorded calls. He flipped to another section. Angel had logs of traders' phone calls. Please tell me you got a wiretap warrant for these. Angel spoke up, voice monotone but confident. Makima authorized an internal security order. It's equivalent to a warrant under PSIA regs for counterintelligence. Chapter 70, Safe House War Room and Legal Strategy, 2. The lawyer pursed his lips. HMPF. In a closed military tribunal that'd be fine. In open court, a defense might challenge it. But considering these bozos were conspiring with foreign agents, I can likely justify it under national security exceptions. He scribbled again, justify wiretaps nat SEC clause. We'll need documentation of Makima's order to include in evidence, to foreclose any argument about illegal eavesdropping. Kishive raised an eyebrow. We can get that. She'll have it drawn up if not already. Tachibana moved on. Now, the honey trap and Dr. Schneider's boasts. He looked at Himeno and Power. Marvelous work, truly. He gave a thin grin. You got him bragging about selling illegal tech and naming Shige's involvement. But, his grin faded. Please tell me you recorded video, not just audio. Power snorted. Of course we did, old man. High def and from 2 angles. She tapped her clutch, which still housed one of the micro cameras. got his face clear as day while he ogled Miss Himeno here and the briefcase. Himeno blew a strand of hair from her face, smirking. He practically signed a confession on camera. Tachibana's stern face cracked into a brief smile. Excellent. That one will stick, especially if we catch him with the money and prototype at the exchange tomorrow. You will catch him, yes. Hiroshi answered firmly. Yoshimura's teams have the Yokohama lab under surveillance already. Schneider will be arrested mid-handover, in possession of everything. The lawyer's grin was downright wolfish. Nothing like a full hands-in-the-cookie jar arrest to make a prosecutor's job easy. He moved down the list. The photo and guilt call the Hayes case. He nodded at Aki. Your forged photo trick was clever. And since he called IA himself and volunteered info, that is admissible. Tachibana tapped a page. We'll list him as a cooperating witness. But we must protect him until trial. Aki confirmed. Hayes's family is already relocated to a safe house. He's under discreet watch. Good, Tachibana said. His testimony will corroborate the timeline of the traitors delaying that raid and tie Mori directly to those officers' deaths. His expression darkened. Murder by willful neglect, that's a heavy charge. Well deserved. A heavy silence followed as all remembered the fallen comrades. Himeno glanced down, absently fingering the lighter she carried in memory of a partner lost. Kishive's single eye gleamed with quiet rage. Tachibana cleared his throat and continued. Now, evidence aside, let's talk procedure. When this goes down, we need arrests done by the book. No excessive force that isn't justified, no warrantless searches beyond the scope, no procedural missteps the defense can cry foul on. He eyed Denji in particular, recalling the hothead's impatience. That means you bring them in alive, conscious if possible, and with their rights read. You don't give their fancy lawyers any excuse to claim police brutality or tainted confessions. Denji bristled, but Aki placed a calming hand on his shoulder. We'll be careful, Aki said. We've waited this long, we won't mess up at the finish line. Tachibana gave a curt nod. I'll be coordinating with law enforcement to have holding cells and immediate indictment paperwork ready. We're not giving these bastards a second of breathing room to lawyer up and wriggle free. He began pacing, the old litigator in him coming alive. We hit them with everything simultaneously, arrest warrants, search warrants for their offices and homes, asset freezes for their accounts, and charges ranging from treason, espionage, corruption, conspiracy to murder. He almost growled the last word. Overwhelm them legally so no single influence or ally can swoop in to save them without implicating themselves. Makima had chosen well. Tachibana was a veteran of such operations. He had taken down Yakuza kingpins and corrupt governors in his heyday, and his approach was as subtle as a sledgehammer, bury the accused under so many charges and airtight evidence that no high-priced defense attorney or political connection would dare try a rescue. He stopped and fixed Hiroshi with a firm gaze. One more thing. Chain of custody on physical evidence. The moment you seize a document, a device, anything, log it, tag it, and hand it to a responsible officer to seal. Defense loves to claim evidence was planted or altered if there's any gap in the custody log. Hiroshi responded, we've prepared labels and logs. Every team member has been drilled to record timestamp and signatures on seizure. He gestured at a stack of forms on a side table, each labeled PSIA evidentiary chain log already filled with case headers for each suspect. The lawyer's eyebrows rose approvingly. You young folks sure do your homework. Kobani mustered a tiny, proud smile at that. She had spent hours printing and organizing those forms. Chapter 71, Safe House War Room and Legal Strategy, 3. Kobani mustered a tiny, proud smile at that. She had spent hours printing and organizing those forms. Tachibana looked around at all of them. His gaze softened almost imperceptibly. In this dim bunker, he saw not just evidence and suspects, but people. These agents, barely out of their teens, some of them, sacrificing their safety and sanity to unmask the vipers in their midst. The grizzled attorney felt a pang of something akin to affection. It had been a long time since he'd been part of a crusade like this. He'd thought those days were behind him, buried under cynicism and bureaucracy. Yet here he was, and damned if he wouldn't give it everything he had. "Listen," he said gruffly, "I've pored over more corruption cases than I care to remember. Seen some slip away on technicalities that made my blood boil. But this time," he slapped the folder on the table for emphasis, "this time we're going to nail every single one of them to the wall." His lined face was fierce with conviction. "They won't slither out of this." Makama's absence hung over the room. She was fighting her own battle in the political arena, but her trust in this team was manifest in Tachibana's presence. Hiroshi nodded firmly at the lawyer's words. "Failure is not an option," he affirmed quietly. Around the table, the team exchanged glances. They were exhausted, dark circles under eyes, bandages on Aki's arm from a scrape at the Shinomiya infiltration, Kobani's fingers still quivering slightly from her nerve-wracking bug plant, Denji's knuckles raw from where he'd punched a wall earlier to vent, but they were united. And they were so very close. A monitor in the corner showed a live feed of Director Takeda's office. Takeda sat at his desk, looking over some documents with a bored expression, utterly unaware that half a dozen cameras and mics were capturing his every move. He likely believed he'd have a pleasant weekend ahead, never suspecting that by the next sunrise he might be in handcuffs. Hiroshi followed Tachibana's gaze to that screen. "Takeda," he murmured. "You have enough on him?" Tachibana asked, tone almost casual. But underlying it was the knowledge that taking down a branch director, a man with friends in high places, required an especially tight case. Aki answered, "We do. Seiko's testimony, Hayes' testimony, multiple recorded orders from him instructing data suppression, the payment records from Shinomiya's shell company directly to him, and Daisy even caught a flicker of guilt in his mind during a casual chat which, while not court evidence, at least guided us where to dig." Tachibana's lips curled wryly. "Mind-reading Pokémon, well, if only we could submit that to the judge." He chuckled dryly at the thought. "No matter. The money trail and communication logs will suffice. And perhaps one of his underlings will flip on him when pressed. Kishive cracked his knuckles. "One will. They'll be looking at life imprisonment or worse. Someone will deal for leniency by spilling Takeda's personal orders." Denji grinned with wolfish anticipation. "Can't wait to see the look on that smug bastard's face." Hiroshi remained silent, eyes still on the monitor. In his mind, he saw not just Takeda but all the faces of the traitors he had greeted each day with a smile. Soon, he would greet them as their captor. Soon. Tachibana snapped his notebook shut. "All right. You've done damn well. The final piece." He paused, realizing something. "Hiroshi, you haven't mentioned one thing, evidence directly tying this network together in one stroke. A linchpin." Hiroshi and Aki exchanged a look. "We were missing one link," Hiroshi admitted. "A solid connection between the PSIA traitors and the foreign intelligence meddling, proof that can't be denied. We've collected bits and pieces, mentions of Jackal, some coded bank payments from overseas accounts. But nothing explosive yet." Chapter 72, Safe House War Room and Legal Strategy, 4. Hiroshi and Aki exchanged a look. "We were missing one link," Hiroshi admitted. "A solid connection between the PSIA traitors and the foreign intelligence meddling, proof that can't be denied. We've collected bits and pieces, mentions of Jackal, some coded bank payments from overseas accounts. But nothing explosive yet." He straightened, a resolve coming into his eyes. "That's why tomorrow at dawn, I have a little surprise planned for Director Takeda." Aki nodded, catching on. "The masquerade," he said cryptically. Hiroshi explained for Tachibana's benefit. "We have a replica of Takeda's face and voice ready. I intend to impersonate him on a secure call to one of his foreign handlers, trick them into acknowledging a deal or giving an instruction. It will be recorded, traceable, and something Takeda can't weasel out of because it will occur in his name. The lawyer's eyebrows shot up. You're going to pretend to be Takeda and get a foreign spy master on tape? Bold. Aki added with a slight smirk, we've scheduled the call when we know Takeda will be unreachable. He always takes a closed-door meditation break at 6 a.m. Our tech will reroute any incoming secure line to Hiroshi instead of his phone. Tachibana rubbed his chin. If that works, it would indeed be a hard link in the chain of evidence, showing the collusion. He gave a cautious nod. Just be careful. If they suspect a trap, they'll clam up. But if anyone can pull off an impression... He looked at Hiroshi appreciatively, it's the elusive fox, I hear. Hiroshi gave a thin, tired smile. I'll get what we need. With that, Tachibana glanced around at the assembled operatives. Their faces were drawn but determined, illuminated by the flicker of screens filled with damning evidence. In a few hours, those same screens would likely light up with live footage of raids, arrests, the climax of all their efforts. Right now, for this last quiet night, they had to keep it together to stay sharp yet also gather their strength. Tachibana closed the accordion file of notes and wrapped it with his knuckles. I'll be heading back to HQ to finalize the warrants and brief the special prosecutors. Tonight, get your final ducks in a row. He made eye contact with each of them in turn. By this time the day after tomorrow, if all goes well, we'll be processing a hell of a lot of prisoners. Power cracked her knuckles excitedly at that, and Kobani gulped but set her jaw ready. The lawyer picked up his coat and started toward the door. Hiroshi followed to see him out. At the heavy steel safe house entrance, Tachibana stopped and turned to the young assistant director, one hand on his shoulder. Despite having only known Hiroshi briefly, he spoke to him like a mentor to a protege. His voice was low, so only Hiroshi could hear. You've done good, kid. Just one last push. Hiroshi met his eyes. The weight of everything yet to come, the danger in the day after tomorrow's confrontations, the uncertainty of how each traitor would react when the trap closed pressed on him. In that moment, he truly felt his age, barely 20, yet bearing a burden fit for a hardened veteran. But he also felt the support of everyone around him, Makama's unwavering will, Yoshimura's steady hand, his team's loyalty, and this gruff lawyer's expertise. He was not alone in this fight. He gave a deep nod. We won't let you down, sir. Tachibana snorted, masking any sentiment. Humph, better not. Then he raised a finger as if delivering a final verdict. You bring me the final piece, kid, and I'll burn every last one of these bastards in court. Guaranteed. Chapter 73, Eve of the Purge. Craving more of the story? This is just the beginning. Unlock 15 additional chapters right now by becoming a patron at patreon.com/ghost_prime. Dive deeper into the world of Pokémon and Spy World and get exclusive access to content only available to our dedicated patrons. Tokyo's vast skyline glittered under a moonless sky, a neon lattice of high-rises and highways stretching into the darkness. On the surface the city was tranquil, the iconic rainbow bridge arcing silently over black water, office towers standing like vigil sentinels in the distance. But beneath that still veneer simmered an unseen tension. In the hushed corridors of power and the shadowed backstreets, final moves were unfolding in a deadly game of intrigue. Tonight was the quiet before the storm, the last calm moments before the coordinated strike that would shake Tokyo by dawn. Roppongi, Tokyo, 11:48 p.m. A lone luxury sedan idled in a narrow alley behind a Roppongi jazz club, its headlights off. From the back seat, Hiroshi stepped out into the drizzle. He wore the face of another man. Underneath a floppy grey wig and expertly crafted latex mask, he had become Director Takeda, the very man he was here to expose. The prosthetic was flawless in the dim light, sagging jowls, thinning hair, even a faint scar above the eyebrow, all replicated perfectly. A subtle voice modulator taped at his throat would deepen and roughen his voice to Takeda's timbre. Hiroshi could feel his heart thudding as he adjusted the collar of Takeda's favorite overcoat, borrowed from the director's own office earlier that week. Stay calm, he reminded himself, be Takeda. This was the final gambit. If he pulled it off, the traitors would damn themselves with their own words. Across the alley stood a discreet back entrance to the club, a nondescript metal door under a flickering lamp. A tall foreign man in a trench coat leaned against the wall nearby, sheltered from the drizzle by the club's overhang. He lit a cigarette, the tiny flare illuminating angular features and pale eyes that missed nothing. This was the man known only as Jackal, a foreign intelligence handler who had been pulling strings in the shadows. Jackal's presence in Tokyo tonight was an unexpected boon. The team hadn't been sure he would risk showing up in person. But Makima's sources had whispered that the spymaster was growing nervous about his Kanto network. He wanted reassurance face-to-face from his inside contacts that their plans were still on track. And so a meeting had been arranged, or rather, intercepted and repurposed. The real Takeda had been subtly encouraged to remain at home on a wild goose chase, a late-night summons by a cabinet official that Makima orchestrated. In his place, Hiroshi had come, masquerading as the trusted middleman Jackal expected to see. Hiroshi strode confidently through the alley, emulating Takeda's brisk, authoritative gait. Each step felt heavy with the weight of the disguise. Underneath the latex mask, a trickle of sweat threatened to sting his eye, but he didn't dare break character to wipe it. Jackal watched his approach, sizing him up through the thin haze of cigarette smoke. In that moment, Hiroshi's senses sharpened the distant honk of a taxi on the main street, the hum of the club's neon sign, the smell of rain on asphalt. Every detail told him this had to go perfectly. There would be no second chance. "You're late," Jackal said in lightly accented Japanese. His tone was curt, betraying a sliver of impatience. He flicked ash from his cigarette and nodded toward the metal door. "Let's do this inside." "I trust you weren't followed, Director." The honorific dripped with a mix of respect and familiarity. Hiroshi forced a tight smile, channeling Takeda's practiced politeness. "My apologies," he replied in the exact cadence of the older man's voice. The modulator buzzed gently against his throat, mirroring Takeda's low timbre. "Traffic at this hour, even I can't clear the roads." He gave a short, wry chuckle and gestured dismissively, the way he'd seen Takeda do. "No tails. I made sure of it." Jackal studied him for half a heartbeat, then nodded and pushed open the club's back door. They stepped into a quiet, empty lounge room lit by the faint blue glow of an electric sign. Tables and chairs were upturned for the night. The club had closed an hour ago. The air smelled of stale smoke and spilled whiskey. In the silence, Hiroshi could hear his own breathing, steady but shallow. He walked to the center of the room, every movement controlled, and turned to face Jackal. The spymaster closed the door behind them and produced a small device from his coat, a signal jammer, most likely which he set on a table. A precaution against unwanted ears. Hiroshi's pulse quickened. His own recording device was embedded in the watch on his wrist, wired to capture everything, but they had planned for this possibility. Yoshimura's tech had installed a hardline recorder tapped into the club's wiring earlier that evening under cover of a maintenance check. Even if Jackal jammed wireless signals, their conversation was secretly being funneled through the building's electrical system to a van down the block. Hiroshi knew Yoshimura would be parked there now, monitoring levels on a recorder, hearing every word. The thought gave him a sliver of comfort. He was not truly alone in here. Jackal took a final drag on his cigarette and crushed it under heel, eyeing Takeda through a thin veil of smoke. "So," he began quietly in English, perhaps testing if Takeda could follow. Hiroshi merely inclined his head. Takeda was known to be fluent, and so was he. Satisfied, Jackal continued in Japanese with a thin smile. "I assume our mutual friends have kept you updated. Your last report was, concerningly light on details." Chapter 74, Eve of the Purge, 2. Craving more of the story? This is just the beginning. Unlock 15 additional chapters right now by becoming a patron at patreon.com/ghost_prime. Dive deeper into the world of Pokémon and Spy World and get exclusive access to content only available to our dedicated patrons. Hiroshi clasped his hands behind his back, adopting the mildly affronted posture of a division chief who'd been questioned. "There's nothing to worry about," he said firmly. "The situation in the PSIA Kanto branch is under control. We've been extra cautious since that unfortunate lab incident, but our friends' research data and specimens are safely moved as you directed." And the new assistant director assigned to us, Kobayashi, he allowed a note of scorn to color Takeda's voice, "he suspects nothing beyond what we let slip." The boy's green and eager to please. "If anything, he's proven useful as a patsy." Jackal's pale eyes narrowed shrewdly. "Yes, this Hiroshi Kobayashi. I've read the profile your people sent." He stepped closer, entering the bluish shaft of light from the sign. Up close, Hiroshi could see Jackal's face clearly: high cheekbones, faint scar along the jawline. A predator's visage. Western educated, bright future, quite a feather in your cap to have him assigned under you. Jackal's lips curved in a thin smile. "But you and I both know rising stars can be dangerous if not managed. Is he truly in line, Takeda? We can't afford wild cards, not at this stage." Hiroshi felt a twist of satisfaction beneath his calm facade. Jackal was playing straight into their ruse. He allowed Takeda to snort derisively. "Managed, indeed. We've taken steps to ensure young Kobayashi stays on our leash. Just last week, one of our colleagues conveniently discovered that he's been moving money into a private account in the Caymans." Hiroshi allowed himself a tight smile, as if sharing a cruel joke. "Of course, that account is a little secret between us and him now. The assistant director knows that if he steps out of line or grows a conscience, certain compromising records will surface to end his career, and likely land him in a cell." He lifted a hand in a casual shrug. "The kid is properly terrified. He'll do whatever we say, believe me." In truth, that Cayman account and the discovered bank records were clever forgeries he and Makima had planted as bait. The traders thought they held blackmail material over him, when in fact the account was controlled by PSIA counterintelligence and the funds merely a looped transfer that proved nothing. Still, hearing it spoken aloud like this, hearing Takeda boast about how they had ensnared him, it made Hiroshi's stomach twist with a mix of adrenaline and disgust. He channeled that emotion into a thin, vicious smile appropriate for Takeda's persona. Jackal's own grin widened, wolfish and approving. He gave a low chuckle. "Good. Very good. A bit of dirt works wonders on bright young men." He relaxed slightly and pulled out a chair at a nearby table, motioning Hiroshi to do the same. They both sat, shadows dancing across their faces from the neon sign outside. "Now, on to the final business. Our friends abroad are pleased with the data flow from your branch so far. The classified documents from the cabinet meetings, the transfer of those, special specimens all handled well." He fixed Hiroshi with a piercing gaze. "But they are also concerned. The Prime Minister has been oddly quiet since appointing that woman Makima as Director General. It smells like a ploy. We suspect he might be preparing a purge, perhaps even using her as the sword." For a heartbeat, Hiroshi's blood ran cold. Jackal's intuition was unnervingly sharp. He fought the urge to swallow and instead gave a dismissive wave as Takeda. "Makima was an unexpected move, yes, but she's just settling into bureaucracy. I've seen no sign of any purge. If anything, she's keeping her head down to avoid making enemies early on." He let a note of mild contempt creep in. "As for the Prime Minister, ITO is juggling too many political fires right now. He won't risk a scandal in the intelligence agency on top of everything else. Trust me, if there were any hints of a crackdown, I'd be the first to know." Jackal drummed his fingers on the table, considering. "Perhaps. Still, caution is key." We're very close to achieving our objectives. One misstep. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You've secured all the pieces on your end? All the key people are either on board or neutralized. I need to hear it from you directly, Takeda. That's why I came. Hiroshi nodded, channeling absolute confidence. Every single one of our insiders is in place. Police chiefs, ministry officials, even a diet member or two. Those who aren't actively helping us have been compromised enough to stay out of our way. And the ones who weren't, well, we've fed them misinformation or tied them up in so much red tape they can't act. The network in the PSIA Kanto branch is airtight. When the signal is given, we can paralyze the agency from within. He allowed himself a thin smile. Frankly, your timing is ideal. Another week, and we'd be ready to pull the trigger on the next phase ourselves. Jackal's eyes gleamed at that. He sat back, seeming satisfied for the first time. Excellent. Convey to your colleagues that our mutual benefactors are pleased. If all goes well, each of you will be rewarded handsomely new positions, financial incentives, protection. He spoke the euphemism for what was essentially payment for treason with such casual ease that Hiroshi felt a flash of anger beneath his skin. Hiroshi forced Takeda to give an appreciative grunt, as if the promise of riches meant little but was expected. Outside, a sudden gust of wind rattled the alley door, a reminder of the worsening weather. Jackal glanced toward it, then back to Hiroshi. His businesslike demeanor lingered, but there was a hint of satisfaction in his posture now. They had given him what he came for, reassurance and confirmation of the traitor's readiness. Every incriminating detail from the leaked cabinet documents to the involvement of police and officials was now captured on tape, flowing even now to Yoshimura's recording van. Hiroshi could imagine the veteran agent hunched over the headphones, eyes widening as each damning word sealed the traitor's fates. Chapter 75, Eve of the Purge, 3. Craving more of the story? This is just the beginning. Unlock 15 additional chapters right now by becoming a patron at patreon.com/ghost_prime. Dive deeper into the world of Pokémon and Spy World and get exclusive access to content only available to our dedicated patrons. Jackal stood, smoothing his trench coat. That should conclude our meeting, he said quietly. But as Hiroshi began to rise, Jackal held up a hand, a final question clearly on his mind. One more thing. The security breach at the lab months ago, the one that started all this. We lost valuable assets that night, and our operation was exposed earlier than planned. His jaw tightened. I trust you've identified the leak on your side? There's no other Hiroshi Kobayashi lurking around, I hope. The spymaster's tone was icy, the implication clear: if there was another mole or a double agent, Takeda would pay dearly. Hiroshi felt a bead of sweat under the mask, but he maintained Takeda's outward calm. Rest assured, he said evenly, we've swept thoroughly for internal leaks since that incident. We believe the culprit was an external element, likely a rogue mercenary team that the Americans or someone sent in, unrelated to us. He allowed Takeda's face to twist in annoyance. If any of my people had been the leak, I'd have dealt with them myself by now. Jackal studied him for a long moment. The silence hung like a blade. Then, seemingly satisfied, the foreign agent gave a curt nod. Very well. I'll be in touch when it's time. He retrieved the signal jammer and pocketed it. Until then, keep your head down. And be careful with that Director General of yours. If she or ITO make any sudden moves, I expect immediate warning. Of course, Hiroshi replied, bowing just enough to appear deferential. Safe travels, Jackal. The word felt bitter on his tongue. Jackal permitted himself the ghost of a smirk at the farewell, then turned on his heel and strode out into the alley, disappearing into the rainy night with purposeful steps. He did not offer a handshake spies rarely do at such partings. In a few heartbeats, the glow of his cigarette and the echo of his footsteps vanished beyond the alley, swallowed by the city. Hiroshi let out a slow, silent breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It was done. The final piece of evidence was secured, and his disguise had been held. In the empty lounge, he allowed his shoulders to relax slightly, the weight of Takeda's persona slipping off. Careful not to dislodge the latex mask just yet, he walked calmly back out the back door into the alley, glancing about to confirm Jackal was truly gone. The sedan was still waiting for him, engine purring softly. As Hiroji approached, the driver, one of Yoshimura's men, gave a small nod from beneath his cap. Hiroji slid into the back seat, finally pulling off the damp wig and mask in one swift motion. Cool air met his flushed, sweat-prickled skin. He sucked in deep breaths, steadying himself. "Got it all?" he asked quietly, tapping his watch, which was now blinking green to indicate a successful recording. From the front seat, the driver lifted a hand from the wheel and revealed a small thumb drive, pinched between his fingers. Even in the dark, Hiroji could see the man was smiling. "Every last word, sir," came the reply. "Yoshimura-san already signaled that the recording is secure." Hiroji closed his eyes for a moment as a wave of relief and exhaustion washed through him. He'd been holding his breath metaphorically for 3 weeks straight inside that viper's nest, pretending to be a pawn for Takeda and his cronies. Now, at long last, they had what they needed to bring the whole rotten cabal down. He had walked into the lair of the lion and emerged with its secrets. A first, crucial victory, but the night was not over yet. "Take me to the safe house," Hiroji said softly. He ran a hand through his own sweat-damp hair, resetting his appearance back to himself. Outside the window, the city lights blurred in streaks of color as the sedan pulled away. Hiroji allowed himself one last look back toward the alley as they turned the corner, as if by doing so he could cast off the last traces of the Takeda disguise and everything it represented. Chapter 76, Eve of the Purge, 4. Craving more of the story? This is just the beginning. Unlock 15 additional chapters right now by becoming a patron at patreon.com/ghost_prime. Dive deeper into the world of Pokémon and Spy World and get exclusive access to content only available to our dedicated patrons. Safe House, Tokyo, 12:30 a.m. Yoshimura's eyes flicked to the wall clock for the 20th time in an hour. Its second hand ticked past 12:30 a.m., and still no alarms had been raised in the city. Good. The operation so far was a ghost in the night, invisible to the targets. The safe house's living room had been converted into a miniature command center. Maps of Tokyo were pinned across one wall, red dots sketched on various neighborhoods marking each identified trader's location. A laptop screen glowed with a real-time tracker app. Each dot corresponded to a tagged vehicle or phone, all updated live. Yoshimura leaned over the screen, his face drawn with concentration and fatigue. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, checked. Metropolitan Police HQ, checked. Dozens of green icons blinked steadily on the map, each representing one of their embedded loyal operatives shadowing a suspect. They had done it under the guise of routine logistics these past few days, harmless errands and bureaucratic tasks that allowed the loyalists to plant GPS trackers, clone phones, or simply trail persons of interest without raising suspicion. An unremarkable sedan parked on a trader policeman's street ostensibly doing a traffic survey now kept a quiet watch. A junior clerk volunteering overtime at a compromised ministry had slipped tiny RF beacons under several executives' cars. Even at this late hour, trusted agents scattered across Tokyo tailed their quarries from a careful distance, maintaining the facade of normalcy. If any trader moved now, tried to run or communicate, Yoshimura would know within minutes. He picked up a secure radio handset and spoke in a hushed voice, issuing an update to the scattered teams. "All units, this is Sato," he said, using his cover name. "Maintain positions and stand by. Final confirmation expected shortly." Releasing the talk button, he heard quiet acknowledgements crackle in, a series of double clicks on the line, the pre-arranged, silent signal that each team was in place and ready. One by one they replied, click click, click click, click click, coming from across the metropolis. Shinjuku, Shibuya, Chiyoda, Ginza, Odaiba, an invisible web of watchers tightening around their unsuspecting prey. Yoshimura's chest swelled with pride at the discipline. These were good people, loyal operatives who had risked everything to help set this trap. Some were PSIA like Hiroshi, others borrowed from the military police, the National Police Agency, even one from the Tokyo Metropolitan Government's office. They had all answered Makima's secret call and spent weeks operating under the radar. Now the moment was at hand. Yoshimura glanced over his shoulder into the adjoining kitchen, which had become an impromptu filing center. There, under the harsh light of a hanging lamp, the veteran lawyer Tachibana-sensei was leading the final legal cross-check. The elderly lawyer's back was to Yoshimura, slightly hunched as he hovered over a spread of documents covering the entire kitchen table. Two younger agents Kobani and Madoka flanked him, passing files and checking items off lists. Even from a distance, Yoshimura could see the intensity in Tachibana's posture. The old prosecutor's pen tapped methodically on each page as he reviewed them, his glasses perched at the end of his nose. Yoshimura stepped away from the glow of the tracker laptop and quietly entered the kitchen area. "How's it looking, Tachibana-sensei?" he asked under his breath. Tachibana didn't glance up immediately. He finished scrawling a note in the margin of a thick affidavit before acknowledging Yoshimura with a curt nod. Deep furrows edged the lawyer's brow, but there was a spark in his eyes. "We're nearly there," he replied, voice low and gravelly. "Just finished cross-checking that each warrant request has the proper signatures and attachments." He picked up a small stack of forms, snapping them lightly against the table to straighten the pile. "Every piece of intel has been catalogued and filed. If a single page were missing, I'd know it." There was a bite of gruff pride in his tone. Despite the hour and his obvious exhaustion, Tachibana's legal mind was sharp as ever, a razor honed by decades in courtrooms and war rooms alike. Chapter 77, Eve of the Purge, v. Craving more of the story? This is just the beginning. Unlock 15 additional chapters right now by becoming a patron at patreon.com/ghost_prime. Dive deeper into the world of Pokémon and Spy World and get exclusive access to content only available to our dedicated patrons. Kobani, dark circles under her eyes, pushed forward a final binder for Tachibana's review. Her hands trembled slightly from fatigue and nerves. Yoshimura remembered that she had spent hours earlier meticulously printing and collating these forms: arrest warrants, search warrants, asset freeze orders covering every target individual and entity on their list. She had even prepared duplicates, color-coded by jurisdiction, so that nothing would be left to chance. Kobani managed a wan smile at Yoshimura. "All evidence summaries are attached to their respective warrants, sir. We triple-checked the cross-references," she said softly, voice betraying her tiredness. Yoshimura gave the young agent an approving nod, then looked back to Tachibana. "We just received word from Hiroshi," he reported, keeping his voice level though he felt a thrill of triumph in his chest. "The recording is secured." That made Tachibana finally glance up from the papers. His hawkish eyes met Yoshimura's, and for a moment the tension in the room eased. A ghost of a smile tugged at the corners of the lawyer's mouth. "So the kid pulled it off," he murmured. Relief and respect mingled in his tone. Then, businesslike once more, he reached for an evidence bag lying open on the table. Inside was a USB drive, the very one containing Hiroshi's freshly obtained incriminating audio. Tachibana held it up carefully. "We'll label and log this as Exhibit A1. It will go with the affidavit to the judge." He nodded to Madoka, the bespectacled agent beside him, who immediately jotted down the time and details on an evidence ledger. Yoshimura let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That audio was the linchpin, the nail in the coffin for the traitors. "Any word on when we get the court signature?" he asked. Tachibana was already a step ahead. "Makima's arranged for an overnight judge to be on standby." He tapped his watch. "At 0200 hours, I'll submit all of these electronically through the secure channel to the special prosecutor's office." Judge Wakabayashi has agreed to review them on the spot. A hint of dry humor flashed in Tachibana's eyes. The poor fellow doesn't know every detail, only that it's a matter of urgent national security at the Prime Minister's request. I suspect he'll have quite a wake-up call with his coffee, Despite the tension, Yoshimura allowed himself a brief chuckle. Waking a judge at 2 a.m. was no small favor, but the gravity of their evidence would shock even a seasoned jurist. And he'll sign off on everything. If we've done our job right, yes, Tachibana replied confidently. He thumped the stack of warrant forms with a finger. I've made damn sure these requests are airtight. Probable cause statements, corroborating evidence, chain of custody, every I dotted and every T crossed. By the book, no loopholes. His expression hardened, the battle-hardened prosecutor surfacing. We are not giving some slick defense attorney even a sliver of daylight to slip their client through. Not this time. He looked around the table at the others, at Kobani, Madoka, and now Aki, who stood leaning in the doorway with arms crossed. We will hit them with everything at once, arrest warrants, search warrants for their homes and offices, freezing orders on their bank accounts, the works. By the time they blink, we'll have them hogtied legally 6 ways from Sunday. Tachibana's quiet, wolfish grin spoke volumes about his confidence in what they were about to unleash. Aki uncrossed his arms and stepped forward. The tall agent's face was drawn with fatigue, but resolved. He'd been out earlier coordinating a few last surveillance errands and had returned just in time to hear Hiroshi's success. We're all set on the ops end, Yoshimura, Aki said, updating his senior. Kishive and Himeno checked in, targets are where we expected. No one's tipped off. He ran a hand through his black hair, trying to shrug off the weariness. Denji and Power are gearing up and resting in the back room. They'll ride with the tactical units for the more volatile targets. Aki's lips quirked, knowing those two were likely chomping at the bit despite the late hour. All our strike teams are essentially in position or 5 minutes out, under cover of normal patrols or duties. Copy that, Yoshimura replied, relief evident in his voice. It was remarkable, everything was aligning precisely as planned. Intelligence, legal, tactical, political, each part moving in lockstep now. He caught Aki's eye and gave a firm nod. Make sure Denji and Power know no improvisations. We need clean arrests, minimal drama. This isn't a brawl, it's a sweep. Aki managed a tired smile. I've told them. They understand, well, as much as those two can. They know what's at stake. In the corner of the living room, through the doorway, Yoshimura could just see Denji's spiky blonde hair as the young man lay sprawled on a couch, arms folded and eyes closed, catching a light nap while he could. Power sat on the floor by the couch, methodically checking the restraint cuffs and tranquilizer darts issued to them, an almost predatory grin on her face even in quiet. For once, neither was making a sound, even that rambunctious pair felt the solemnity of the moment. They were exhausted, all of them were, but ready. Yoshimura turned back to Tachibana, who was now gently closing each dossier and slipping them into a large reinforced briefcase. The lawyer clicked the case shut and rubbed the bridge of his nose under his glasses. Yoshimura noted the tremor in the old man's hand, not of fear, but sheer tiredness. How many hours had Tachibana slept this week? 2? 3? Yet he was soldiering on with the vitality of a man half his age, driven by purpose. No room for error, Tachibana murmured, almost to himself, as if reciting a mantra. He looked up at Yoshimura, Aki, and the others assembled. His gaze lingered for a moment on each of them, on Yoshimura's weathered face, Aki's determined eyes, Kobani's nervous resolve. Finally he spoke, voice firm. This is it. All those long days and longer nights, it all comes down to the next few hours. If we've missed anything, a single form, a single signature, the prosecutions could stumble. We are not going to let these traitors slip through our fingers on a technicality. Understood. Understood, Yoshimura said, and the others echoed quietly. The room fell into a brief hush as that sank in. "We won't let you down," Hiroshi had told Tachibana earlier, and everyone here meant it with every fiber of their being. Failure was not an option, not after the betrayals they'd endured and the chaos that nearly consumed the country. Chapter 78, Eve of the Purge, 6. Craving more of the story? This is just the beginning. Unlock 15 additional chapters right now by becoming a patron at patreon.com/ghost_prime. Dive deeper into the world of Pokémon and Spy World and get exclusive access to content only available to our dedicated patrons. A soft chime sounded from the laptop in the other room. Yoshimura moved to check it, and his expression brightened. "Hiroshi's en route. He'll be here in 5 minutes." A collective exhale of anticipation went around. They all wanted to see him safe, and to hear confirmation from his own lips that the mission succeeded. True to that promise, minutes later the safe house's coded knock sounded at the door. Aki and Yoshimura exchanged a quick look. Aki already had his hand resting near his holster, but the knock pattern was one of their own. Yoshimura unlatched the heavy door to reveal Hiroshi standing there in a damp overcoat, hair slightly mussed from removing his disguise. He looked tired, drenched in midnight rain and perspiration, but determined. In his hand he held the small recorder device from his watch, already removed and sealed in an evidence bag. "Welcome back," Yoshimura said quietly, clapping Hiroshi on the shoulder as he ushered him in. The moment Hiroshi stepped inside the safe house's narrow entry, he was greeted by a round of subdued nods and relieved smiles from his comrades. Kobani even let out a tiny cheer before stifling it, cheeks flushing. Hiroshi gave a weary grin in return. "It's done," he reported without preamble, holding up the bagged recorder. Jackal took the bait completely. "We have him on tape confirming everything, their whole network, the foreign backing, all of it." As he spoke, his eyes roamed the room, taking in the maps, the screens, the stacks of legal documents. It struck him powerfully, every system was indeed coming together here in silence. His fieldwork, Yoshimura's surveillance web, Tachibana's legal acumen, Makama's strategy. This is really happening. Tachibana took the evidence bag from Hiroshi with careful hands, inspecting the device through the plastic and nodding in grim satisfaction. "Well done, son," he said, the gruffness in his voice unable to mask genuine admiration. "I'll attach this to the affidavit package. Judge Wakabayashi won't have a shred of doubt after hearing it." Hiroshi allowed himself a long exhale and sank into a chair for a moment as the others continued final preparations around him. His body hummed with adrenaline, but also bone-deep fatigue. 3 weeks of playing the clueless pawn, of looking traitors in the eyes and feigning ignorance, of sleepless nights anticipating every move, now it was nearly over. The evidence was in hand, the warrants were moments from approval, the strike teams were ready. He ran a hand over his face and felt the slight sting of where the latex mask had pressed into his skin. In the corner, Power offered him a bottle of water, a rare thoughtful gesture from her, and Hiroshi accepted it gratefully, gulping down half in one go. The cold water steadied him, washing away the taste of anxiety that had lingered from the encounter. Yoshimura knelt by Hiroshi's chair briefly, speaking in a low voice meant only for him. "You did brilliantly. You've given us the last puzzle piece." The older man's eyes shone with pride and relief. For a second, Hiroshi saw not the hardened operative but the mentor who had trained him from the start, the man who had been like an uncle, or even a father, throughout his career. Hiroshi managed a small smile. "I had a good coach," he whispered back. Then he straightened, pushing aside the moment of sentiment. "When do we move?" "Soon," Yoshimura replied. He glanced at the clock and then at Tachibana, who was already placing a call via a secure tablet to the judge. "Once the warrants are signed, Makama will give the green light. We're thinking within the next 2 hours, before any of them stir or catch wind." Hiroshi nodded. He knew many of the traitors would be at home in bed by now, thinking themselves safe, dreaming of whatever rewards their betrayal would bring. By the time the sun rose, those dreams would have turned to nightmares in a cell. The thought should have brought satisfaction, and it did, but Hiroshi also felt a solemn weight. Some of these targets were people he had worked with for years before the betrayal was known. To have them arrested as enemies of the state, it was necessary, absolutely necessary, but it was also tragic. He saw the same heavy realization in Yoshimura's eyes. They would celebrate later, but for now, the task remained grim and serious. In the kitchen, Tachibana finished his brief call, speaking in polite, urgent tones to the judge. When he returned to the living area, he announced, "Give him 10 minutes. He's reviewing the files now." The lawyer's face softened for a moment as he looked at the assembled team, the young agents wiping sweat from their brows, rechecking gear, and exchanging anxious looks. "Make no mistake," Tachibana said quietly, "we've done everything possible to ensure success. From here, it's in the hands of the judge, and then in our hands to execute without a flaw." Hiroshi stood again, drawing himself up despite his fatigue. "We will," he said, voice steady. Around him, Aki, Denji, Power, Himeno, just slipping back in after confirming her target hadn't moved, and all the others straightened as well. Weapons were quietly loaded and safeties checked, zip ties and evidence bags were counted out. A palpable sense of resolve swept through the safe house. They were exhausted, dark circles under every pair of eyes, adrenaline fighting with weariness, but they were ready. Yoshimura's phone vibrated in his pocket, and he retrieved it swiftly. A secure message flashed on the screen, a single kanji character, order/command, followed by 2 words, "Warrants signed." Yoshimura let out a breath, and a ripple passed through the room as he announced, "It's done. Judge has signed the lot." There were faint smiles, a few nods of quiet vindication. Kobani even closed her eyes for a second in visible relief. Tachibana muttered a soft "thank goodness" under his breath, then immediately began transmitting the signed digital warrants to the designated law enforcement leads who would officially enact them. Hiroshi glanced at the clock, 1:57 a.m. The witching hour. Outside, the rain had eased to a mist, and the city was deep in slumber, oblivious to the reckoning about to unfold. He could almost feel the tension coil in the air, ready to snap. "All right," Yoshimura said, assuming a commanding tone as all eyes turned to him. "This is it. We move on. Makamas go. Everyone knows their assignments. Double-check your comms and kit. We likely won't get a second chance at many of these targets if they slip away." A chorus of quiet "hi" went around as final confirmations. Hiroshi secured a tactical vest over his shirt, even as he double-checked that his sidearm was loaded and set to safe. He wouldn't be kicking down doors personally, his role was largely done, but he was still going out with Yoshimura to coordinate between teams on the ground. He caught a glimpse of himself in a shard of mirror on the wall, tired eyes, determined set of jaw, and felt a surge of resolve. First mission milestone, don't stumble now. As the team began to file out of the kitchen-turned command center, the flickering glow of the overhead lights catching on their gear and weary expressions, Tachibana cleared his throat. The gruff veteran's voice, worn thin by fatigue but still sharp with conviction, cut through the hum of motion. "One last thing," he said, straightening his coat with deliberate care. His gaze swept over the room, over agents hardened by fieldwork and newly christened by this night's trials. "This purge, these arrests, it isn't just about taking out the trash." He paused. "It's justice. Justice for every innocent life endangered, every secret sold, every line of defense that was quietly corroded by their greed." The weight in his words hung heavy, grounding the moment. "You're tired. I can see it in your shoulders. But no shortcuts. No improvised detours. We finish this clean and by the book. When the sun rises, and cameras flash and courtrooms stir, we make damn sure no one, not a single soul, can say this wasn't righteous." He adjusted the collar of his trench coat, a battered briefcase already in hand. "We're not just reclaiming files or turf tonight. We're reclaiming the honor of the PSIA's Kanto branch, and through that, the foundation for this country's future security. Aki stepped forward, placing a firm hand on the older man's shoulder. We know. We won't stumble now. Everything's been exact down to the second. We've come too far to make noise at the finish line. Others gave subtle nods. Kobani, clutching a satchel of evidence drives, power, already half out the door but pausing to listen, Angel, unreadable as ever but focused, Denji, quietly energized for the chaos to come. And Hiroshi, face still half shrouded in the shadow of his latest mask, stood at the rear of the group. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The unshakable stillness of his presence was enough. This operation had run on timing, stealth, and precision, but also on the natural gravity that Hiroshi brought to any mission. He simply inclined his head in agreement, quiet steel in his expression. Yoshimura stepped beside him. "Let's go," he said simply. The team moved out. The reinforced door creaked open to reveal the narrow alley beyond, its asphalt glistening from recent rain. The air smelled of ozone and tension. Lined up along the curb were a fleet of unmarked vehicles, their engines already running in low idle. Headlights were dimmed. Everything about them screamed discretion. Agents peeled off in pairs and trios, slipping into their designated rides. Each vehicle was bound for a different node in the web of Tokyo's intelligence infrastructure: apartments, offices, suburban safe houses where traders now lay unaware beneath warm blankets or closed folders. They had no idea the blade was on its way. As the last of the team climbed in, Yoshimura paused, stepping out into the alley and glancing up. The clouds were thinning overhead, and a silver shard of moonlight broke through, casting faint reflections across the puddles at his feet. He imagined all the pieces now set in motion, the surveillance units adjusting their scopes, the evidence courier teams prepping for chain of custody confirmation, the municipal police already parked discreetly near key zones, waiting for the warrants just uploaded to their secure tablets, the JSDF operators in mobile vans, armed and ready in case any door refused to open peacefully. And above it all, in Nagatage, the Prime Minister's residence waited with still-lit windows, Makama's silhouette no doubt standing at the ready, watching over everything, waiting for the last green light. For a moment, Yoshimura and Hiroshi locked eyes through the passenger side window. No words passed between them. Just a nod. A quiet affirmation of all they had endured and what was left to be done. Hiroshi let out a slow, silent breath. The kind you take when the blade hovers just before the strike. Then he turned his gaze forward, spine straightening. Engines hummed. The convoy pulled out, merging with the sleeping city's night roads. Not a siren wailed. Not a light flashed. Yet, as they scattered, some toward ministries, others toward downtown embassies and remote government compounds, the entire team knew, they were now within striking distance. Every corner of Tokyo had been marked. Every target quietly logged. Every step had been rehearsed. Only one voice could unlock the final sequence. The entire city was holding its breath, and all eyes, seen or unseen, now turned to the solitary command center atop the hill. The final key was in Makama's hands. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.